It starts in the laboratory, where the girl lectures Lloyd about how the freshness of ingredients determines the perfection of alchemy, a principle she enforces without compromise. Lloyd insists he kept the materials fresh, but she cuts him off immediately, dismissing any explanation and declaring that what he brought does not meet her standards. As the criticism continues, Lloyd's mind drifts back to when he was 19 and working at a drugstore. His attention snaps back to the present the moment he sees the phantom flower, Fleur d'Insel, lying in the trash. Shock tightens his chest as the memory resurfaces. An entire week spent searching, sleepless nights endured, and the risk he took to bring it back within 3 days. All of that effort disappears in an instant, as Ruby discards it without hesitation. She is known throughout the kingdom as a kind-hearted alchemist, an impeccable genius responsible for countless magic tools and potions. From Lloyd's perspective, however, she feels more like a devil. She remains irritated, insisting that everything produced in her lab must be of the highest quality. She treats this result as yet another failed attempt at material gathering. The structure of alchemy is clear. The alchemist designs the recipe and performs the compounding, while the assistant mage gathers the materials. Her success rate in both recipe creation and compounding is flawless. Lloyd's success rate in gathering materials, by contrast, is only 40%, far below the 90% or more expected of an average assistant mage. Because of this failure, she concludes that the request will not be completed in time, and Otori's reputation has suffered once again due to Lloyd. She presses him on whether he understands the weight of what he has done, reminding him that it is his duty to deliver materials that meet her standards on time. Lloyd lowers his head and apologizes. Her frustration sharpens. She clenches her teeth and berates him for apologizing instead of doing his job properly, branding him as useless, goofy, and slow. Ruby harshly condemns Lloyd, stating that his material finding rate is the lowest in the entire kingdom, and that it is deeply embarrassing to her. She emphasizes that everyone is talking about him and insists that he should already be aware of how poorly he is viewed. Lloyd apologizes again. That only fuels her irritation further, as she lashes out at him for apologizing every time. Lloyd falls silent. Even if he wanted to stop her from breaking things, he knows someone like him has no right to say so. Society already looks down on him. The pressure of her constant harassment weighs heavily, pushing him to the edge of what he can endure. Lloyd closes his eyes tightly. Then, without warning, he reaches a decision. He resolves to end it. Lloyd averts his gaze, his voice unsteady as he explains that he is tired of being an assistant mage and that he is leaving Otori. Ruby looks at him with confusion, then casually sits back in her chair, treating his declaration as if it were nothing more than a routine complaint. She assumes he will return by evening and even adds a reminder about dinner. Lloyd stares at her in disbelief and makes it clear that he is ending their relationship today. Ruby dismisses it again, telling him to leave quickly if he wants to go somewhere and remarking that his personality is irritating. Lloyd activates his item box. For him, the destination does not matter. He only wants to escape this place as fast as possible. He glances at the box and asks what she just placed inside. Ruby explains that it is a letter asking him to buy Earl Grey on the way back and even wishes him luck running away from home. Lloyd fumes at the realization that she is still turning him into an errand boy even now. Later, Lloyd sits quietly on his own. As he watches his surroundings, he feels that letting his emotions spill out is not a bad thing. He wonders where he should go from here, then suddenly questions why he is still thinking about buying Earl Grey at all. The habits drilled into him run deep. Something catches his attention. He looks up and sees a dragon soaring across the sky, flying freely with its massive wings spread wide. Tears slip from his eyes as he watches it with pure admiration. In that moment, he resolves to live like that dragon, unbound and undisturbed by anyone. His quiet moment is broken when a nearby child points him out, and the child's mother warns her not to associate with someone like him. Lloyd stands up and walks away, deciding to start his life over from scratch. Later, inside a carriage, Lloyd sits comfortably with a book, feeling lighthearted. He believes that once the carriage arrives, a town where no one knows him will be waiting. He glances to the side and notices a boy and a girl sitting close together. The narrow space of the carriage forces their proximity, and their shy reactions fill the air with a gentle, romantic atmosphere. Lloyd watches them with a sense of awe, feeling slightly awkward but not resentful. He reflects that while couples like them share warmth, his own relationship with Ruby was more like that of a servant and a noble. Even so, he finds himself admiring her, remembering how different she once was. In his memory, Ruby calls out to him, telling him not to cry. Lloyd answers through tears, brushing it off as hunger. Ruby snaps at him that if he is going to apologize, then he should stop crying. Lloyd cries even harder, apologizing again. Her patience breaks, and she tells him to be quiet. She hands him a piece of bread. She lays out her resolve clearly. She will become the greatest alchemist in the country. By doing so, she will live like a noble, despite growing up in an orphanage, and she will be able to eat as much as she wants. For that future, Lloyd is to remain her assistant mage. Lloyd looks at her while holding the bread and agrees. From then on, they focus solely on their respective roles, shutting out everything else. Each of them desperately pursues their own path. As a result, Otome gains widespread recognition. Ruby is eventually ordained as a one-of-a-kind aristocrat, Alchemia Steel. With that success, her arrogance grows, and her humanity steadily erodes. The memory fades as the carriage suddenly comes to a stop. Lloyd is confused by the abrupt halt. A commotion erupts outside, with the coachman shouting. When Lloyd nervously asked if a monster had appeared, the girl responded with irritation. She pointed out that his shady mumbling had interrupted their conversation, cutting through the tension with blunt annoyance. Lloyd immediately responded, insisting that she shouldn't call someone shady when she doesn't even know them. The boy beside him apologizes, explaining that the girl tends to speak her thoughts out loud. Lloyd says he does not mind and suggests getting out to see what happened. Outside, the girl trembles in fear as she stares at a massive worm-like creature. She panics, insisting she has no chance against it. The boy scolds her for giving up before even trying and declares that he will protect her, even at the cost of his life. She responds with admiration, professing her love. Lloyd watches them in silence. A trace of envy passes through him, knowing he and Ruby never shared anything like this. Wanting to help, he explains that he has fought the creature before and might be able to offer advice. The boy is relieved by his presence and urges him to do so. Lloyd calmly explains that the monster's weak point is its head, and that it can be defeated by striking it there. The two listen, but remain unsure. The boy points out the obvious problem of its massive size and questions how anyone could get close to its head. Lloyd advises them to work themselves up and focus on something else. They are left speechless. The girl quietly dismisses him as unreliable, calling him an introvert once again. Lloyd reacts internally to the remark. Before anything more can be said, the monster attacks. The couple freezes in fear. Lloyd moves immediately, grabbing them and chanting a spell. An explosion erupts, obliterating the creature. The two stare at him in shock, falling completely silent. Lloyd explains that destroying the head like that is effective. The boy points out that the entire body was blown away. Lloyd acknowledges this, scratching his head in embarrassment and apologizing that his advice may not have been very helpful. The boy still thanks him sincerely. The girl, however, reacts in disbelief, insisting that something is clearly wrong with the situation. Members of the guild question the attack in shock, wondering what kind of magic that was and why the boy is not surprised. Lloyd himself is confused, unsure what is strange about his magic at all. The boy treats it as normal, while the girl firmly insists that it is not. The girl points straight at Lloyd and loudly declares that his attack magic is impossible, something that should not exist, calling it a cheat. Lloyd feels deeply hurt, realizing she is criticizing his magic while still treating him as nothing more than a shady introvert. Soon after, her tone shifts. She apologizes for earlier remarks, admitting that the explosion magic was overwhelming and left her in shock. She reveals that she is a mage as well, which the boy finds obvious given that she carries a staff. She pushes back against that assumption, arguing that judging someone by a staff alone would make even an elderly person a mage. The boy shrugs it off, remarking that everyone grows old eventually. Lloyd silently notes how casually cruel the comment sounds. Without warning, the girl bows deeply in front of Lloyd and asks him to teach her magic. Lloyd panics and tries to deny it, insisting that he is not that skilled as a mage. She refuses to back down, begging him earnestly and even calling him her master. The word leaves Lloyd stunned. For so long he has been treated as incompetent, valued only as Ruby's childhood friend with no worth beyond that role. The girl continues apologizing for her earlier rudeness, though her words mix respect with bluntness. The boy points out the contradiction, noting that she is blending honorifics with insults. Lloyd gently pats her head, acknowledging that people make mistakes when they are young. He sets only one condition, that she uses her magic responsibly. The girl reacts with pure admiration, declaring how amazing he is and even volunteering to become a guarantor for his debts. The sudden shift unsettles Lloyd. Being called sensei catches him completely off guard, and he immediately tries to deny the title. She refuses to let it go, insisting she wants to know more about him and asking who he really is. Lloyd hesitates, wondering whether these two would still accept him if they knew the truth about his past. He carefully asks if she knows Ruby the alchemist. The girl answers with excitement, praising Ruby as the greatest alchemist in the country, a legendary figure whose inventions have shaped history. Lloyd presses further, asking if she knows the name of Ruby's assistant mage. Her response is immediate and harsh. She recites his reputation in full, branding Lloyd as the incompetent mage with a material collection rate of only 40%. She openly expresses her hatred, blaming him every time Ruby fails to make money and wishing for his death whenever she reads about Ruby failing a quest. She finishes by asking Lloyd what that has to do with him. Lloyd falls silent. Through tears, he admits that the Lloyd she wishes would die is him. The girl freezes, struck speechless by the realization. Lloyd accepts it quietly, telling himself that being hated is something he can endure. After some time, they arrive at their destination. The girl pieces everything together, understanding that Lloyd quit being an assistant mage and came to Minerva to start over. She calls out to him again, insisting that he truly is an amazing mage and that he should have more confidence in himself. Lloyd feels a small sense of happiness. Making friends this quickly feels like a promising beginning. The girl grows animated, suggesting a dramatic makeover, imagining him in a fur coat with a mohawk and even a spiky bracelet. Lloyd steels himself, resolving to stay grounded. 3 weeks pass after he leaves the capital. Lloyd urges himself forward as he finally arrives at Minerva, the city of life in the southern light region. He is done with people like Ruby. He sets his sights on a carefree, enjoyable routine, convinced that his second life truly begins here. That belief lasts only a moment. A powerful blast tears through the night, scattering shards of energy through nearby buildings. A woman stands before him, halting his path and declaring that this is the limit of his evil. Lloyd stares at her in shock. On his very first day in Minerva, he never imagined that his second life might end so quickly. You've read this far. Might as well subscribe. Retreating now would be a shameful defeat. A few hours earlier in Minerva, the southern light regional city, Lloyd takes in the view with quiet surprise. After a 3-week carriage ride from the capital, he did not expect a place this distant to feel so alive. Mars explains that the city places heavy emphasis on the adventuring business, while Lara notes that it serves as a strong foundation for Minerva's economy. Lloyd reacts with surprise when he realizes the two of them are adventurers. Mars casually suggests that Lloyd could join them. Lloyd hesitates, doubting that he is suited for that kind of life. Lara immediately objects, insisting that Lloyd fits the adventurer mold perfectly. She frames adventurers as travelers who earn their living by defeating monsters, gathering materials, and exploring dungeons, then points out how closely that mirrors the work of an assistant mage. Lloyd reluctantly acknowledges the similarity. Lara suggests discussing the future over lunch. Lloyd is caught off guard, only to be swept along as Lara confidently declares that she and Mars will support his second life. Lloyd is struck by the thought that someone is genuinely willing to listen to him, feeling as if this openness itself represents the sunlight of Minerva. Lara brushes off the dramatic framing and questions why he is being so frugal about food. Lloyd explains that he already ate during the carriage ride. Lara warns him that with that mindset, he will remain trapped in his first life. Mars asks what she means, and Lara proudly introduces a tapioca milk tea that has become wildly popular in Minerva. Rating it highly, Mars urges her to focus on lunch instead. Lara then hands Lloyd a sheet of paper and asks him to write down the job he wants. Lloyd accepts it, but his hand freezes. Faced with the question of what he truly wants to do, his thoughts spiral. Old voices resurface, overlapping and intrusive, demanding food, materials, obedience, and blaming him for failures. The pressure overwhelms him, and he admits that he cannot think of anything. Mars observes that Lloyd seems to have abandoned his dreams for Ruby. Lara offers another perspective, suggesting that the answer could be a job he has never even considered before, then forces himself to move forward. He fills out the paper as best he can and hands it back to her, uncertain, but taking his first step all the same. Lara examines the paper. As she and Mars read through it, both of them fall silent. It is titled as Lloyd's Second Life Wish List. Every option is crossed out with careful reasoning. Becoming an adventurer is rejected because Ruby might find him. Dungeon exploration is dismissed for the same reason. School is ruled out as too late, laboratory work is too restrictive. He wants something outdoors, something that allows him to use magic. Mercenary work is rejected as well, since he does not want to be stained by blood. Mars reacts bluntly, remarking that Lloyd is surprisingly picky for someone aiming for a modest life. Lara follows, admitting that his reasoning for avoiding adventuring is so negative that it leaves her disappointed. Trying to break the deadlock, Lara energetically suggests running a tool shop. She points out that his experience with material gathering would be useful. Lloyd considers it and admits that it does not sound like a bad idea. But the thought immediately spirals. He imagines Ruby appearing as a customer, demanding materials without hesitation. The imagined confrontation leaves him sweating, unsure how he would even respond. Lara moves on to another idea and suggests carpentry. Lloyd reacts with visible shock. His imagination betrays him again. He envisions proudly presenting finished work, only for Ruby to dismiss it outright and reduce him to nothing more than an assistant mage. The imagined scene tightens his chest, his apologies repeating even in his own thoughts. Sensing his unease, Mars grabs his hand and urges him forward, insisting they become adventurers together. Lara supports him, telling him there is no reason to live in fear of Ruby. She says it would be a shame to abandon what he truly wants to do, and that the idea of Ruby finding him at all is unlikely. Even if she did, the choice of whether to return would still be Lloyd's alone. And if he chooses to walk the path of an adventurer, they will stand with him. Mars reinforces the idea, encouraging him to at least try. Lloyd looks at the two of them, tears welling in his eyes. Gratitude finally breaks through his fear. He thanks them sincerely, overwhelmed by their kindness. Lloyd turns to Mars and asks if, by becoming an adventurer himself, he could be like them. Mars answers without hesitation, assuring him that he can. Closing his eyes, Lloyd feels a surge of resolve. The fear that once bound him to Ruby is gone. From this moment on, he declares himself a new Lloyd, ready to embrace his second life. With determination, he announces that he will try being an adventurer. As they continue walking, Lloyd remarks on how freeing it feels to move without fear hanging over him. Lara comments that it sounds almost depressing, while Mars points out that it is a significant step forward. Lara's attention is caught by a bronze statue nearby, and she exclaims in amazement. Lloyd explains that it is a statue of the saint from the Emerald Church, a revered figure who receives divine messages. He warns her that insulting the saint in a neighboring kingdom would be punishable by execution. Lara shivers at the thought, while Mars notes that Lloyd clearly knows a lot about religion. Lloyd bids them farewell, promising to meet at the Adventurers Guild the next day. Lara, puzzled, asks why he isn't heading to the inn. Lloyd replies that he is hungry and wants to train his skills in preparation for his debut at the guild. Lara doubts whether he might be overdoing it, while Mars simply expresses relief that he seems happier. Night falls over the streets. From behind, two strangers close in on Lloyd and press a blade against his face, making their intent clear as they demand money. Lloyd stiffens, realizing the danger, and refuses to let his adventuring days end before they have truly begun. But before anything can happen, a powerful blast erupts. Lloyd freezes in shock, recognizing ice spears, a high-level spell. A girl appears, declaring that this is as far his evil can go, and ordering them to stay put. Lloyd watches her in amazement. The men advance, shouting aggressively, but she remains composed. Lloyd worries that her magic could cover the entire town in ice if unleashed recklessly. Acting quickly, he enhances his own strength and lands a punch on one of the attackers. He advises her that ice spears are powerful but difficult, and that in such situations, beginner spells are safer. He hands her the staff. She hesitates, apologizing, but Lloyd reassures her, acknowledging that he was saved thanks to her. She responds simply, "You're welcome." He can't help but wonder who she is, dressed like a priest yet wielding powerful magic. Before he can dwell further, she interrupts, noticing that his cheeks are bleeding. Lloyd brushes it off, saying it is only a scratch. The girl steps closer and gently grabs his face, asking him to stay still. She explains that she is skilled in healing magic. The sudden closeness catches Lloyd off guard. His face turns red as he realizes how near she is, closer than he has ever been to anyone before, even Ruby. She notices his flushed expression and points it out. She introduces herself as Iris. Lloyd responds awkwardly, giving only his name. She repeats it, and he confirms it again, simply Lloyd. He thanks her and asks if she lives nearby. Iris explains that she does not, having arrived in Minerva just today. Lloyd is surprised by the coincidence and admits the same. Iris smiles at that, and Lloyd is struck by how bright it is. Iris asks what he does for a living. Lloyd answers that he is an adventurer. She reacts with admiration, assuming that a mage like him must be impressive. Lloyd grows flustered and downplays it, then asks about her situation. Iris replies that she is currently unemployed. Lloyd reacts in surprise, realizing they are similar in that regard. He asks why she came to Minerva. Iris explains that she wanted to try the tapioca milk tea. Lloyd mentions that he knows a shop that sells it. Iris brightens immediately and asks him to guide her. Just as they are about to move, she pauses and checks the time. She explains that it is getting late and that her attendant is waiting for her at the inn. Lloyd smiles, momentarily puzzled by the word attendant, thinking it sounds like something out of old aristocratic traditions. He makes a light remark, imagining her as an alchemia returning home, then hesitates as Ruby's familiar scolding voice echoes in his mind. Iris apologizes politely for her sudden departure and addresses him with unexpected formality. Lloyd freezes. Iris then asks him for a favor. Lloyd immediately agrees without hesitation. She asks if he could help her find her way back to the inn. Lloyd is caught completely off guard by the request. At a distance, Lyra and Mars observe the scene. Lyra explains that she followed Lloyd out of concern, but now finds the situation far more interesting than expected. She begins to frame it as a dramatic romance, imagining an exaggerated climax. Mars cuts her off, pointing out how far her imagination is running. Lyra insists she is simply setting the mood. Mars offers to step in and lead the way himself. Lyra snaps at him, accusing him of ruining the moment and declaring that she's in the middle of refining critical romantic components. She raises her bow and fires an arrow, which embeds itself into a nearby building. Lyra stares in shock, stunned by the result, then declares that the gods must be favoring her today. Mars looks at the structure and asks what she thinks she is doing. The building she struck is the Adventurers Guild. Lyra turns to Mars and speaks with sudden conviction. She declares that happiness can be found when people who share the same problems exchange encouragement and connect through love. She proudly notes that it is a line from chapter 125 of The Letter of Insulation to the Incompetent Prince, calling it nothing more than modest support from a coupling elf of light. Mars silently wishes Lloyd luck. Nearby, Lloyd tells Iris that he never expected her to be the type to get lost. Iris reacts with visible embarrassment, telling him not to say it out loud. Lloyd abruptly stops walking. The Adventurers Guild stands before them. He suggests that they ask for directions inside. They step into the guild together. Lloyd politely begins to ask for help, but the atmosphere shifts instantly. Several men turn toward them with fierce, hostile expressions. One of them demands to know which of them did it. Lloyd responds in confusion. The man's anger escalates as he accuses them of defiling the portrait of their beloved saint. Lloyd and Iris freeze in shock. Another man points directly at Lloyd, accusing him of being the incompetent mage who holds back the kingdom's #1 alchemist. Lloyd is stunned that he is recognized, wondering if his face has been seen in the capital, and realizing that Iris now knows his reputation as well. The accusations intensify. He is labeled the traitor who fled the capital and then attacked the guild. The men move in to strike. Lloyd forces himself to focus. This is not the time to hesitate. He searches for a way to stop them without anyone getting hurt and casts a spell. Chaos erupts. The men shout in panic, unable to cut through what restrains them. They scream as something moves within their bodies, pleading for it to stop. Lloyd panics internally, realizing he has created a horrifying scene. Cries of pain echo through the hall as others call out in confusion, trying to report the situation. Lloyd tries to explain, insisting they are mistaken, but his words falter. Iris suddenly looks upward. She calls out a name in shock. Lloyd asks if she knows that person. Iris confirms it, explaining that she was once her knight and bodyguard. Lloyd reacts in disbelief at the word bodyguard. Above them, a woman mutters in confusion, trying to grasp the situation. She looks down, her expression shifting as recognition strikes. She voices her shock, identifying the figure below by name, the Saint of Holy Roland, Iris Elzerbel-Chort. The woman and the men behind her drop to their knees and bow deeply. They apologize for what happened earlier, explaining that they did not realize the great Saint Iris of the Holy Roland Kingdom was among the group, and that she had been repeatedly disrespected by the guild members. They offer their apology in unison. Iris urges them to raise their heads, explaining that she normally wears a mask and did not expect to be recognized. Lloyd watches the scene unfold and wonders if this level of submission is guild policy, as everyone remains bowed low. One man suddenly voices confusion, questioning what is so special about being a saint, especially since she comes from a neighboring country. Another immediately scolds him, calling him an ignorant newcomer and stressing that she is an extremely important VIP. The man panics and hurriedly apologizes. He then reflects on what he knows. A saint, also known as a holy maiden, possesses a rare power called holy law. That power revitalizes life itself, cultivating fertile lands and sustaining prosperity. In contrast, regions untouched by holy power become uncultivated territories, turning into demonic realms where dangerous high-ranked demons roam freely. He tells himself to wait. Lloyd briefly thinks that perhaps he should have dispelled the vines restraining them earlier. He recalls that each country can only have one saint born within it, and from the moment of birth, the entire nation exists to protect her. At the same time, he remembers Iris saying she was unemployed, and the contradiction unsettles him. The woman turns sharply and glares at the men behind her. She declares that those who raise their fists against the saint will be demoted to E-rank adventurers. She charges toward them, and the men scatter in panic. Iris calls out urgently and asks her to stop, explaining that she is no longer a saint and asking that they not be punished. The woman freezes in shock and blurts out her disbelief, demanding to know what happened to the saintess instead. Iris reassures her that there is already a new saint who has taken her place. Lloyd is stunned by this revelation. If Iris is no longer a saint, then what exactly does that mean? He worries whether it is truly safe for her to admit this in front of such fervent believers, unsure how they might react. Silence settles over the group. One of the men breaks down emotionally, declaring that this is exactly how a saint should be, moved by the lengths Iris is willing to go to protect them. The others follow, overwhelmed and crying openly. Lloyd watches in complete disbelief as the situation spirals in a direction he never anticipated. Iris turns to Mrs. Isolde and addresses her. Isolde, clearly moved as well, agrees not to punish the men if that is Iris's wish, but warns her not to lie again. Iris affirms that she is telling the truth. The mood shifts instantly. Someone shouts praise, and soon the voices multiply, hailing Iris as a saint. Lloyd stares at them in shock, realizing that no matter what she says, their devotion has only deepened. To him, their behavior feels overwhelmingly fanatical. Afterward, outside the guild, Iris remarks that it feels like the dawn of a new day. She notes the direction they need to take, pointing down a nearby street. Lloyd responds with mild surprise, realizing how quickly time passed while they were dealing with the trouble inside. As the events replay in his mind, he admits that things could have gone badly and that Iris truly saved the situation. He suddenly apologizes to her, saying she was dragged into strange trouble because of his bad reputation. Iris panics and quickly denies it, insisting that getting lost was her own fault and that she does not think Lloyd is a bad person. She smiles, saying she genuinely enjoyed talking with him that night. Unsure of what else to do, she had simply wandered through the city. She explains that this night has become her very first memory as just Iris and asks him not to apologize. Lloyd falls silent. He reflects on the fact that Iris has lived her entire life as a saint. Everyone carries their own circumstances, and he feels he can understand her loneliness, the emptiness that comes from not having a place where one truly belongs. Iris notices his silence and asks if he is all right. Lloyd replies that he only wanted to thank her for everything she has done. Iris tells him that thanks are unnecessary, then suddenly smiles. She remarks that when he speaks so formally, it makes her expect too much, calling him Prince Lloyd. Lloyd blushes in embarrassment. His eyes dart around as he searches desperately for something to say or do. Then he stops, noticing the clock tower in the distance. He realizes it is the answer he was looking for. Lloyd suggests going to the clock tower. Iris agrees without hesitation. Lloyd lifts her into his arms and casts a physical enhancement spell. He leaps high toward the tower, prompting a startled scream from Iris. She tells him that he surprised her, and Lloyd immediately apologizes. Iris watches him with admiration as they reach the top. They stand together in silence, overlooking the city. Iris breaks the quiet, saying that the view of the city from the sky is beautiful. Lloyd is startled and warns her to watch her step. Thanks to the magic light stones that illuminate the entire town, light is stored during the day and released again at night, keeping the streets bright even after sunset. He mentions that the tower was built by a great old goldsmith named Hecate. He explains that during the days he spent running nonstop to gather materials, moments like looking down at the town from a mountain were the only times he felt at peace. Iris looks at him and thanks him softly. Lloyd asks her to wait a moment and not take her eyes away. As the sun rises, the magic stones across the city begin to glow. Lloyd explains that they shine most beautifully when they absorb the morning sunlight. He admits that he lived his life as an assistant mage, grew tired of everything, and ran away to Minerva. In truth, he says he is nobody special. But even so, he is glad he can show his favorite scenery to a special friend. Iris smiles and says it truly is beautiful. She speaks happily, expressing her wish to find her own place in this beautiful world. Lloyd smiles back at her. Iris reaches out and holds his hand. Lloyd blushes deeply. Suddenly, Iris looks behind her and shouts Lloyd's name in shock. Lloyd nearly loses his footing and slips from the rooftop, but Iris reacts instantly, gripping him with all her strength and pulling him back, holding him firmly in place. She is breathing heavily as she confronts him, accusing him of throwing himself forward as if searching for hope in life itself. Lloyd explains that he did not mean to do that, only that he wanted to live up to her expectations. Iris falls silent. Then, without warning, she starts laughing. Lloyd watches her in confusion. Through her laughter, Iris remarks that Lloyd is a strange person. She adds that he has already surpassed her expectations completely and honestly. Lloyd asks what kind of life Iris wants in her new place. She hesitates, thinking it over, then answers that she wants to spend calm, relaxing days with her new friend. Elsewhere, Lara laughs to herself with clear satisfaction. She declares that everything is going exactly as planned and excitedly turns to Mars, celebrating what she sees as a victory for the paired bow and arrow. Her enthusiasm is cut short as Miss Isolde and her men glare at her. One of the men restrains Mars, while Isolde addresses Lyra with a threatening presence, demanding to hear more about this so-called story. Lyra stiffens, overwhelmed by fear and nervous tension. Far away, in the royal capital at Ruby's atelier, Ruby erupts in anger. She refuses to believe what she is hearing as a report is delivered to her. The official informs her that more than a week has passed since the request was issued. Ruby insists that they are in an emergency and argues that they can simply wait until her assistant mage returns. The response is immediate and unforgiving. As an auditor, the man informs her that the atelier's rating is being lowered to B. Ruby is struck speechless. She desperately calls out, trying to stop him as he leaves. Her mind races. The atelier's rank is the foundation of its trustworthiness, and without it, her popularity will collapse. Fury consumes her. She blames Lloyd, cursing him for not returning even after 3 weeks. The other members of the atelier anger her just as much, having promised help only to refuse her with excuses. She rages that if Lloyd could retrieve those materials, then no one else has any right to refuse, knowing how difficult they are to obtain. She lashes out, kicking a nearby post and shouting accusations of jealousy, convinced that others are sabotaging her out of envy for her talent. Gasping for breath, she declares that everything is Lloyd's fault. In her heart, she hardens her resolve. One day she will become a Chronicle-class alchemist, just like Hecate. Lloyd, she decides, is completely unnecessary. Even if she were to die, someone else would take her place. With desperation tightening her chest, she reaches a final conclusion. She must find a new assistant mage. Quick break. Like and subscribe if you appreciate the work that goes into this manga. At the Adventurers Guild, Lloyd waited with growing unease. The day he was supposed to become an adventurer had arrived, yet the two meant to stand with him were nowhere in sight. The delay weighed on him, leaving him restless and uncertain. Isolde appeared, dragging Lyra and Mars behind her. The sight caught Lloyd off guard, and panic set in as he rushed toward them. Isolde explained that an unavoidable incident had occurred that morning, requiring a brief interrogation. She asked whether Lloyd was their partner, while he took in their disheveled state, stunned that so much trouble could arise in only half a day. Isolde addressed Lloyd directly, noting that she had heard rumors about him and wanted to know why he had come to this town. Lloyd broke into a sweat under her gaze, unsettled by the intensity of the questioning and unsure what kind of interrogation this truly was. Earlier, in the grim interrogation room of the guild, Mars had called out to Lyra in concern after realizing she could not speak. Isolde had explained that silencing magic had been used on the half-elf to avoid conflict with a mage. She pressed them for their reason for attacking the guild, raising suspicions of religious extremism or foreign agents. Lyra, anxious and unable to speak, desperately tried to steer the situation. She urged Mars to explain that they had been attacked by bandits and struck by a stray arrow, hoping for a plausible excuse. Mars seemed to understand, offering a reassuring smile. Instead, he relayed that Lyra wanted to become a cupid of love. Panic surged through her as she realized he had misunderstood completely. Isolde reacted with confusion as Mars continued, explaining that Lyra admired letters written to console an incompetent prince and believed love could resolve anything. Lyra flushed with embarrassment, her silent protests mounting as Mars spoke on with confidence, insisting that honesty about her motives would make everything clear. Mars began to elaborate further, but Lyra, overwhelmed, struck him to stop him. Her reaction made it clear that the situation had spiraled far beyond what she intended, and that her personal tastes and interests had no place in this interrogation. Back in the present, Lloyd trembled as he watched the aftermath of the ordeal. He asked what kind of interrogation they had undergone. Isolde decided to let the matter slide this once, imposing a penalty instead. Lyra and Mars would take on requests free of charge 3 days a week for a month. As Isolde grew serious, her thoughts turned elsewhere. She noted the strength required to incapacitate even some A-rank adventurers within the guild, considered Lloyd's reputation as an assistant mage labeled incompetent in the royal capital, and recalled how the St. Iris had appeared without warning the previous night. The attack on the guild could not be explained by Lyra and Mars alone. Isolde's attention settled on the man connected to both incidents. If he posed any threat to Minerva, she would have him expelled from the city under the authority of the guild. She watched Lloyd closely, gauging whether he would reveal his true intentions under pressure. Mars broke the tension by asking whether Lloyd had already become an adventurer. The sudden shift startled Lloyd, and when Isolde immediately demanded to know what had been said, he froze. Fear overtook him, and he could only deny it before his voice failed him. Isolde declared that the guild was always seeking new recruits. To Lloyd, it felt as though the test had already begun. She informed them that they were heading to a certain location and that Lloyd would be required to touch the trial crystal there. That act alone would determine his qualification to join the guild. Lloyd turned to Lyra for clarification. She explained that the trial crystal was said to be a hidden treasure capable of measuring the strength of anyone who touched it. When Lloyd hesitated, she encouraged him forward, reminding him that she could not remain discouraged forever. She added that the crystal was also used for vocational aptitude, personality analysis, compatibility checks, fortune-telling, and even life advice. The number of functions caught Lloyd off guard. Then one detail stood out. If it revealed vocational aptitude, it could show which profession truly suited him. Excitement rose as he realized that, if so, He might not need to force himself into becoming an adventurer after all. With renewed resolve, he agreed to proceed, and Lyra responded approvingly. Isolde observed quietly, considering that the trial crystal might expose Lloyd's true nature. They soon arrived at the Temple of the Winds, a dungeon located an hour away from Minerva. Isolde explained that the crystal was kept on the top floor of the tower and that they would advance while exterminating the monsters inside. Lloyd asked whether Isolde herself had touched the crystal and whether she had discovered her own vocation. She dismissed the question as none of his concern. As they moved deeper inside, Lloyd suddenly stopped. He sensed something wrong and alerted the others before rushing toward the stairs. He identified monsters on the floor below, specifically black spiders and beetles. Lyra questioned whether other adventurers were under attack. A magical strike hit one of the black spiders. Lyra declared that the monsters should retreat, announcing that the area was now under the protection of Class B adventurers. Almost immediately, a spider leapt toward her face. Startled, she screamed and fled in fear. Isolde turned to Lloyd and explained the core purpose of the Adventurers Guild. Even with the power of the saint, monsters continued to emerge without end. Drawing her sword, she released wind magic that tore through the monsters, emphasizing that this was why the guild existed, to eliminate every last one. Lloyd reacted in shock at the sight of a magic swordsman in action. As he looked up, another spider descended toward him. He hastily cast a physical enhancement spell and narrowly evaded the monster's attack. Lyra warned him of danger from behind. Lloyd responded instantly, releasing lightning magic toward the approaching threat. As Isolde watched him fight, she noted that there was no wasted movement in his actions. His casting was precise, his timing controlled. Once the monster was defeated, Lloyd pointed out that beetles were low-grade monsters but valuable sources of materials. With the spiders present, capturing them became easier. Isolde paused at that observation, reconsidering what she had heard about him. The image of an incompetent mage no longer aligned with what she was seeing. She decided to test him further and asked what he would do if he encountered a monster stronger than himself. Lloyd answered calmly that he would first overwhelm it with 16 consecutive bursts of explosive magic before retreating. The mention of explosions caught Isolde off guard. 16 bursts of explosive magic meant high-tier spells, powerful enough to erase most opponents entirely. Even if he was exaggerating, the choice of response itself was abnormal. Something about him did not add up. Isolde called for a short break. Lloyd immediately reacted to the sight of tea, gladly accepting it. Lyra stated with pride that, as a descendant of a noble elf tribe, she naturally carried tea with her and even served it properly. Lloyd remarked that the situation suddenly made him feel like a commoner. Isolde handed Lloyd food and instructed him to eat. When he asked whether she had prepared it herself, her tone turned sharp, making it clear that refusing was not an option. Lyra quickly intervened, and Lloyd accepted the meal without further hesitation. They ate together, and the mood softened. The food was genuinely good, leaving them quietly satisfied. For Lloyd, it was the first time he had eaten homemade food inside a dungeon, and the experience stood out to him. Lyra praised Isolde, remarking that it was impressive for someone so skilled with both sword and magic to also be a good cook. Isolde accepted the compliment confidently, stating that as the only daughter of the Lord of Minerva, she had been raised to master many skills to uphold her family's name. The revelation surprised Lyra, who realized that Isolde was also a noble. Isolde dismissed the matter, making it clear that no special treatment was necessary. Lloyd asked whether Isolde's training had reflected her crystal-determined vocation. Rising to her feet, Isolde announced that they were moving onward, beginning the climb up the temple's upper floors. As they ascended, Lyra leaned close to Lloyd and whispered, suggesting that Isolde seemed to be hiding her crystal results and asking if he wasn't curious. Lloyd admitted that some things were better left unknown, though he did wonder how the crystal would actually determine a vocation. Lyra fell silent for a moment before quietly requesting a favor from him. On the top floor of the Temple of Winds, Isolde stopped before the trial crystal. She instructed Lloyd to hold it, explaining that he could ask it anything and it would provide an answer. Isolde then posed a question herself, inquiring about her own abilities. The crystal responded with precision. She was an advanced user of magic and swordsmanship, and her adventurer rank was S. Lloyd stared in amazement, struck by the crystal's ability to comprehend and respond to their queries. Lyra, unable to contain her curiosity, asked what Isolde's vocation was. Startled, Isolde shouted at her to stop. The crystal ignored the protests, revealing Isolde's top 3 vocations. First, martial artist. Second, holy knight. And third, baker. The final answer froze them all. Isolde blushed furiously, and the 3 stood motionless, stunned by the unexpected revelation. Lloyd, scrambling to find a reaction, muttered that he liked sweet things, a nervous attempt to break the tension. Before they could recover, a griffin suddenly appeared, roaring as it attacked. Mars called out in shock at the sight. Lloyd, initially mistaking the creature for a mere ornament, shouted warnings as it swooped in. The griffin's beak closed around the crystal, swallowing it whole before taking flight. Lloyd's voice broke with desperation as he cried out, frantic and disbelieving, mourning the loss of the crystal and the chance to discover his own vocation. They chased after the griffin, Lloyd shouting for it to return the crystal. Lightning arced from his hands, striking toward the beast, but it twisted in midair, evading the attack. Lyra called out in surprise at how deftly the creature dodged, while Lloyd pressed on, unleashing a massive thunder spell that detonated with a roaring explosion. Lyra's voice rose in alarm, scolding him for risking the tower, and he apologized hastily, insisting it hadn't been intentional. Mars questioned why a high-level griffin had appeared in the temple, but Isolde cut him off, insisting that such questions could wait until the threat was neutralized. The group moved in unison toward the winding hallways, their pace urgent. Isolde called out, scanning the maze-like interior of the temple, warning that straying from the main path could lose them the trail. Mars, frustrated, shouted at them not to run, earning a sarcastic reply from Lyra. Suddenly, Mars called out a question about Isolde, asking what her favorite food was. A voice responded immediately. Fluffy pancakes. Mars pointed in the correct direction, leaving them momentarily stunned. The crystal had answered, even from a distance. Lloyd wondered aloud whether the trial crystal would respond if he removed his hands, and Isolde explained that she had seen people receive answers even after contact. Encouraged, Lloyd asked what type of magic Isolde excelled at. The crystal responded, wind magic. He followed up with more personal questions, while Isolde grew increasingly flustered. When asked about her favorite animal, the crystal answered the rabbit. For her favorite book, it revealed a love novel. Lyra's excitement grew, while Isolde's embarrassment deepened, scolding them to stop and not pry too far. The crystal continued, answering questions about Isolde's preferred story genre and even her favored romantic pairing, each response drawing more blushes and exclamations from Isolde. Meanwhile, the griffin maintained its distance, the gap stubbornly unshrinking. Lloyd muttered his frustration and prepared to cast a spell to increase their speed, determined to close the distance and reclaim the crystal. Lloyd cast a physical enhancement spell, and the group surged forward with sudden speed. Isolde's eyes widened in shock, questioning whether such a low-level spell could truly move them so fast. Lyra screamed as she struggled to keep her footing, panicked at the sheer velocity, fearing she would fall. Mars reacted instantly, pushing her to safety while shouting warnings. He vowed to give everything to protect her, even at the risk of his own life. Despite his efforts, he stumbled, and Lyra's voice rose in alarm, calling out his name. Isolde observed grimly, noting that two of their most valuable members had already fallen behind in the chase after the griffin. Elsewhere, a man muttered in frustration, claiming he had reached his limit. Another countered sharply, reminding him that such complaints were unacceptable for someone aspiring to be an adventurer. A third encouraged him, insisting that they were at the top and capable of more. The conversation shifted when the man mentioned Lloyd, remarking that he had heard he would soon join their guild. Curiosity arose over who had examined him, confirming it was the guildmaster. A laugh followed, tinged with disdain, as one commented on the irony. Sincere dedication marred by the appearance of the outfit she wore. The men in the guild muttered among themselves, noting that no one dared to form a party with Isolde and guessing that anyone who trained under her would likely be out cold from the harsh regimen. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a voice emanating from the griffin, asking about Isolde's favorite pajamas. The crystal answered immediately, a pattern of bunnies and moons. The men froze, eyes widening at the unexpected response, just as the griffin turned its attention on them, attacking with terrifying speed. Lloyd shouted in triumph, realizing he had finally caught the crystal. The man behind him barely managed to react, yelling about the griffin. He called out to Isolde, bewildered, asking what this creature was and how to handle it. Isolde ordered all novices to evacuate immediately. The man, still flustered, attempted to ask about the pajamas, but she silenced him with a sharp command to go. Focused entirely on the griffin, Lloyd prepared for battle. He declared his intent to take the crystal at any cost. The griffin flinched as he cast water bullet magic, which the creature narrowly dodged. Lloyd cursed, wishing he could remove it from the tower entirely to finish it in a single strike. Determination lit his expression, and he vowed to retrieve the crystal no matter what. Isolde's gaze lingered on him with suspicion. She recalled rumors of Lloyd, the man who had supposedly dragged down the kingdom's best alchemist, labeled incompetent in magic, yet capable of wielding a variety of spells and knowledgeable about monsters. The intensity of his fixation on the crystal struck her. Could it be that from the very beginning, he had come to Minerva aiming for it, exploiting St. Iris's powers for his own gain? Lyra, noticing the griffin's aggression, muttered that it was because of Lloyd that Mars had nearly been in danger. Without hesitation, she cast silencing magic at the griffin. Isolde's shock was immediate. She realized Lara had negated her own sounds. Lara explained silently to herself that Master Lloyd had taught her the technique earlier, and that her strength lay in applying it effectively. Seizing the moment, Lyra advanced on the griffin, leaping behind it. She struck with precision, forcing the creature to drop the crystal from its jaws. Lloyd's cry of joy echoed through the temple as the crystal became free. They raced forward to retrieve it, and Lloyd's wide smile widened further when he finally held it in his hands. Lara collapsed nearby, exhausted but victorious. Eager to know his own fate, Lloyd asked the crystal to reveal his vocation. The answer came immediately. He was to be Ruby's servant. Shock froze him in place, the word servant echoing in his mind. Memories of Ruby flooded back, her scolding him for staying up late studying alchemy, pushing the lamp aside with her foot, and warning him not to do anything beyond her instructions. She had reminded him with wicked delight that he was her assistant mage. Pain and frustration coursed through him as he cried out in anguish, realizing he had no choice but to obey Ruby. The thought of being bound to such a role weighed heavily, and the others around him couldn't help but react with laughter at his plight. Lloyd cried out in frustration, wishing he could change his fate, wondering why life denied him the choice. Isolde watched him, her expression one of surprise. Lara rose to her feet, eyes widening as she warned them, just in time for the griffin to strike at Lloyd with its claws. Isolde intercepted the attack with her sword, holding the creature at bay. She turned to Lloyd, her voice firm and unwavering, reminding him that the crystal's words did not decide his path. He did. She spoke with conviction, proud of the path she had chosen for herself, even if baking cakes might have brought more smiles. Her words touched Lloyd, giving him resolve. Isolde pressed the attack, driving the griffin out of the tower while instructing Lloyd to strike with all his strength once the creature was exposed. As Isolde released her wind magic, the force drove the griffin out of the tower and into open air. She immediately signaled Lloyd to act. Without hesitation, he unleashed his thunderstorm magic. The surge of lightning struck cleanly, every spell landing as intended. The combined magic overwhelmed the griffin, and the monster was defeated mid-air. With the threat neutralized, they carefully returned the crystal to its place. Isolde confirmed that everything was back to normal, and admitted she had suspected he might have come to Minerva with a scheme. She asked Lloyd to forgive her for the doubt. Shocked, he demanded confirmation, and she smiled, assuring him that he could still choose his path in the town and that she was rooting for him. Lloyd exhaled in relief, gratitude welling within him. Turning back to the crystal, Isolde inquired about Lloyd's favorite food. The answer came, pot-au-feu. To celebrate his successful completion of the adventurer's trial, she promised to treat him. Lloyd's voice rang with excitement as they left the tower. Lyra called out his name joyfully, congratulating him on passing the trial. He responded warmly, thanking everyone. Isolde praised him for his effort, noting that he could now take quests from the guild once a week. Lyra, unable to contain her excitement, asked if they could do a guild request together tomorrow. Lloyd checked with Mars, who proudly assured him he could heal enough in the time available. Isolde interjected softly but firmly, reminding them that she was the guild leader, but Sunday was her day off, usually reserved for adventuring. It became clear she had wanted to be included. Lyra seized the opportunity to request a cake from her, promising to bring a recommended novel as well. Isolde declined politely, though the exchange left the group in high spirits. They continued planning for the next day, laughter and conversation filling the air. Lloyd watched them, a small smile on his face, realizing that for the first time, he truly felt he could belong here. Lara spoke quietly, noting that they were merely following elven teachings, and asked if that was acceptable. Isolde replied with mild surprise that interaction with other religions was always welcome. A few days later, in a bustling inn in Minerva, a chef hummed cheerfully as he presented his morning preparations: a fresh egg omelet, ketchup made from ripe potatoes, consommé soup left to simmer overnight, and homemade bread. He proudly invited Iris to enjoy his carefully crafted breakfast, his voice full of anticipation. The chef froze when he noticed the maid, who casually mentioned that Iris had left early to practice magic. Confused, he asked about her breakfast, only to learn that the head maid had brought her sandwiches. Disappointment washed over him, and he fell to his knees, lamenting the loss of his daily joy, waking Iris with a refreshing meal. The maid observed that Iris seemed slightly changed since arriving in Minerva, appearing more active, perhaps influenced by that mage after all. Stirred by curiosity, the chef immediately rose and approached her, asking Saphira to share more of the story. She ignored him, continuing to chew. Frustrated, he demanded that she stop eating. Reluctantly, Saphira recounted that on the first night they arrived in Minerva, Iris had sneaked out and met a man named Lloyd. It seemed the two had grown close, and Iris was already looking forward to their next encounter. The chef's expression darkened, muttering in frustration, then erupting in anger at not having known sooner. He accused Saphira of being part of some scam, to which she replied that Nero hadn't asked her, muttering that it was troublesome. Demanding details, Nero asked what Lloyd looked like. Saphira described him as tall, with black hair and a plain face. Nero grinned wickedly, declaring that he would accompany Iris on her next escort. Playfully, he drew a figure on the omelet and sliced through it, adding that he was eagerly anticipating the day Iris and Lloyd would meet again. 1 week earlier, at the Adventurers Guild, a woman reported the completed request. 40 goblins and 20 red boars had been subjugated, earning a reward of 3 gold. She reacted with surprise, noting that such a mission normally required 3 full days. She questioned how it had been finished so quickly. Lyra answered with pride, attributing the result to their status as elite adventurers. Mars added that, in truth, they had barely moved at all. Lyra immediately silenced him, making it clear that such details did not need to be shared. Isolde suddenly called out, drawing Lloyd's attention. He turned and froze when he noticed what she was holding, a massive 4-layer cake. She explained that her subordinates had discovered her fondness for baking and wanted to try it, so she had made enough for everyone. She then addressed Lloyd directly, stating that he should complete at least one request entirely on his own. Lloyd responded with confusion. Isolde clarified that he was still constantly looking after Lara and Mars. She had wanted to bake, so she baked, and asked whether he truly had nothing else to do. Lloyd replied lightly that living a slow life was the best thing in the world. Isolde could only stare at him in silence. Images of his daily routine surfaced naturally, preparing breakfast for others, doing laundry, offering to clean rooms without being asked. Lyra called out to him, requesting red boar curry for dinner. Isolde snapped at them, pointing out how dependent they had become on Lloyd, then sighed in frustration. At the very least, she thought, he should start making time for himself. The next day, in the Great Forest of Vid, Lloyd reviewed his work. He had accepted several commissions, including a request to subjugate 100 goblins over 4 nights and 5 days, which had concluded that morning. He decided to take a quick lunch break, planning to finish 3 tasks before the day ended. A familiar voice surfaced in his mind, suggesting that with recovery magic, rest was unnecessary. Lloyd immediately followed the thought further. If he stayed up all night, perhaps he could complete 5 tasks instead. His eyes widened as the realization struck. That approach ran completely counter to the slow life he claimed to want. The imagined voice pressed him, questioning what he even did during a slow life. Lloyd found himself unable to answer. In his mind, the image of Ruby forced food into his mouth, ordering him to eat, work, and return. Sweat broke out across his face. He recalled Isolde's cooking and pushed back against the thought. He decided he would cook for himself, for his own sake. He would make pot au feu. The voice reacted with clear disapproval. Lloyd remembered how pot au feu had been his favorite food at the orphanage, even though it had only ever contained vegetable scraps, and how his single sausage was always taken away. The imagined voice insisted that curry was better. Lloyd argued that it had always been his dream to cook pot au feu properly using good ingredients. When the voice scoffed at the idea of hauling water from a distant well, Lloyd countered that the labor itself enhanced the flavor of the soup. The voice erupted in anger, demanding curry instead. Lloyd froze as the outburst echoed in his mind, the tension between the life he wanted and the habits he could not yet escape colliding head-on. Startled by the sudden blast, Lloyd questioned what had happened and sprinted toward the source of the explosion. When he reached the site, he saw Iris floating on the surface of a lake. Shock took hold as he rushed to her side and pulled her to safety. She reacted in surprise, embarrassed at being seen like that. Once she recovered, Iris explained that she had been practicing magic by the river near Minerva. A failure in her control had carried her all the way there. The distance stunned Lloyd. The journey from Minerva to that location normally took 2 hours by carriage. Iris hesitated, mentioning that if she did not report this, her servants would worry. Lloyd stopped her, asking who she meant, and she clarified it was her attendants. He assured her that he would bring her back after her clothes had dried. Iris expressed her gratitude. Lloyd suggested having a meal while they waited, explaining that he had prepared his favorite dish. Iris reacted with surprise. When Lloyd opened the pot, he froze. What stared back at him was curry. Iris asked if curry was his favorite dish, and admitted that it was hers as well. Lloyd broke down, trembling as he realized he had not even managed to cook what he truly loved. He berated himself for his uselessness. Iris called out to him in confusion, then calmly took the ladle and tasted the curry herself. As Lloyd continued to despair, Iris suddenly remarked that it tasted good. She smiled and praised his cooking sincerely. Relief washed over him. and he thanked her. He explained that curry was Ruby's favorite dish. When Iris asked who Ruby was, Lloyd described her as his childhood friend, a mage who aspired to become the greatest alchemist in the kingdom. He spoke of her with admiration, smiling as he described how he merely followed her instructions and supported her work. Iris responded by calling Lloyd admirable. His eyes widened at the word. She explained that success required the support of others, and even if people parted ways, the help given still mattered. She told him that being someone who could support others was a wonderful thing. Lloyd looked at her in quiet amazement. The thought crossed his mind that living a slow life with Iris like this would be ideal. He admitted that he had believed escaping Ruby would solve everything, but coming to Minerva had shown him otherwise. Without changing himself, nothing would truly change. Realizing how much he had spoken, Lloyd apologized. Iris reassured him that she understood. When he asked if she truly did, she confirmed it, explaining that the reason she was no longer a saint was because she herself had failed to change. Silence settled between them. Lloyd realized that despite everything, he knew very little about Iris. From afar, Nero watched the scene through a telescope. His expression hardened as he leaned forward, irritation rising as he focused on what Lloyd was feeding Iris. Iris began sharing stories about her servants. She mentioned that Cephelia, of all people, had eaten every bit of the food Nero prepared. Lloyd noticed how animated Iris became whenever she spoke about them, how easily laughter followed her words. He responded with genuine enthusiasm, wanting to hear more about the two. Their conversation was interrupted by a voice calling out for Iris. Iris immediately brightened, turning toward the sound with clear excitement. Teruru had arrived, remarking that Iris seemed to have been swept even farther down the river again today. Iris introduced her as Teruru, her servant and headmaid. Teruru addressed Lloyd, explaining that she had heard much about him and thanking him for the help he had given Iris. She glanced around, noting that she had come to return items Cephelia had forgotten, then wondered aloud where the others were. Iris panicked and explained that they had become separated and that she had come all the way here on her own. Teruru responded sternly, pointing out that Iris was once again doing something pointless. She reminded her that practicing advanced magic was dangerous and that she had been warned to stop. Lloyd could only think that Teruru was intimidating. Iris apologized but insisted that if she wished to live without the burden of being a saint, then helping others was still important. Teruru responded dryly, questioning whether that meant freezing Cephelia and the others again. Watching the exchange, Lloyd found himself admiring Iris's sincerity. Acting on impulse, he addressed Teruru directly and suggested that he be allowed to teach Iris magic himself. Iris reacted with immediate excitement, expressing complete trust in him and insisting that with Lloyd's guidance, she would be safe. Teruru considered this, then agreed on the condition that she would stop the training the moment she sensed danger. Lloyd pointed out that there was a wide-open area further downstream, and they began moving in that direction. From a distance, Nero observed the scene. He questioned why Teruru was present, noting that he had initially suspected Lloyd of having ulterior motives. Yet all he could see nearby were a desk and basic cooking tools. His irritation flared at the thought of Iris eating such an amateur meal. Turning around, he ordered Cephelia to demonstrate the swordsmanship of a former holy knight, only to stop short in shock when he saw her eating. Cephelia explained that she was checking the food for poison. She added between bites that she had forgotten her holy sword, but if it was the radish he had asked her to pick up, she still had it. Nero snapped back that he did not need it, especially not a week later. Cephelia continued eating, casually remarking that the curry was delicious and reminded her of Nero's own. Nero reluctantly tasted it himself, reasoning that as Iris's chef, he needed to know everything she consumed. The moment the flavor reached him, he froze. He recognized the balance immediately. Carefully chosen ingredients, harmonized spices, rice cooked evenly without flaw. The dish felt like something prepared for royalty. In terms of technical skill, the one who made it stood on equal ground with him. Then Nero sensed something else. Beneath the refinement, the curry was steeped in fear. To him, it felt wrong, unnatural. He concluded that the person who cooked this would one day bring misfortune to Iris. In his mind, the decision was already made. That person had to be removed. At the same time, Iris explained that she was still practicing the water dragon spell and asked Lloyd to guide her. He confirmed the spell she meant and instructed her to begin by forming a small vortex, then gradually expanding it. Iris responded with visible excitement as the water beneath her began to churn violently. Panic set in as the flow grew unstable. Lloyd reacted immediately, casting a water bullet that pierced cleanly through the surging waves and dispersed the pressure. Teruru watched with a darkened expression, questioning whether this training was truly safe for Iris. Lloyd reassured her at once, insisting it was fine and stating that he would remain by Iris's side until she mastered it. Iris straightened, confidence returning, and declared that she would give it everything she had. Lloyd smiled in response. As he watched her, a memory surfaced of the first time he himself had been able to use water dragon magic, back when he had been on the verge of death in the desert. He pushed the thought away at once, refusing to let Iris face anything like that. From a distance, Sephilia and Nero observed the scene. Nero assessed the situation methodically, confirming the downstream area was safe and that Iris had moved away from the river. He then called out Lloyd's name, apologizing inwardly as he resolved to eliminate him there. He ordered Sephilia to act. Sephilia hesitated, muttering that Lloyd could at least make good curry. Nero dismissed it, stating he would simply make Iris something even better. Sephilia acknowledged the command and launched her attack, unleashing her radish slash. A massive surge of water exploded outward. Lloyd sensed it instantly and glanced back. Iris and Tiruru both cried out his name. Without hesitation, Lloyd calmly cast water dragon magic. The summoned flow redirected the raging water, transforming the violent surge into controlled movement. Nero shouted in shock as both he and Sephilia were swept off their footing and dragged into the lake. Lloyd explained to Iris that it was a useful spell, one that allowed her to manage floods on her own. Iris absorbed the lesson, staring at him in amazement. Nero yelled at Sephilia, telling her this was her chance to act, only for her to respond that she could not, having already eaten the radish. Nero erupted in frustration. Iris finally recognized the two figures in the water, reacting in shock. Tiruru immediately called out their names and addressed Nero with a sharp, threatening tone, accusing him of once again pushing Sephilia into reckless behavior and ordering him to come back at once. Nero recoiled in fear at the sound of her voice. Before anything else could happen, a deep rumble echoed through the area. Nero and Sephilia froze and slowly turned around. A massive fish burst from the water, its enormous body towering over them all. Shock rippled through the group as they recognized it for what it was, a legion fish. A high-class monster appearing in an unexpected place. Lloyd fired a flame arrow at the creature. The attack struck true, forcing the monster back beneath the surface, but it quickly surged again, still aggressive. Nero shouted in disbelief as the assault continued. Lloyd assessed the situation with urgency. Legion fish would not stop attacking until the entire swarm was eliminated, but using explosive or lightning magic here would put everyone at risk. The tension tightened as the threat refused to subside, the margin for error narrowing by the second. Iris moved first. She rushed toward the monster and released Ice Spear, driving the spell into its body. Lloyd reacted with surprise at her choice of ice magic against water. Iris immediately apologized as the monster surged upward. The creature leapt from the lake, and a massive fish fell toward Iris. Tiruru reached her first, throwing herself over Iris to shield her. The others froze, watching in shock and worry. Iris stared wide-eyed as the fish closed in, calling out to Tiruru while unable to move. Sephilia and Nero rushed forward to help. Nero called Tiruru's name as the massive monster prepared another strike. Everyone looked up at the same moment. The legion fish suddenly exploded. Lloyd checked on them at once. Nero confirmed he was fine, but Iris reacted sharply. Her focus snapped back to Tiruru. She stood frozen, watching the fish swarm around her, fear clear in her expression. Iris acted. She cast water dragon magic, unwilling to let anyone be hurt while standing aside. Tiruru's eyes opened as the spell took shape. The others stared as Iris carefully controlled the water, lifting Tiruru free and placing her gently on the ground. The spell ended, and Iris faltered slightly. Lloyd reacted in amazement as she succeeded. The group rushed to Tiruru, calling to her in concern. Iris supported her and checked her condition. Tiruru responded calmly, remarking on the beauty of Iris's magic. Iris relaxed, relief visible as she smiled. Lloyd watched them gather around Tiruru. He recognized the difference clearly. The magic he had mastered was meant to protect himself. Iris had learned it to protect others. Tears slipped down Iris's face as she smiled at Tiruru. Lloyd smiled quietly in response. Nero approached Lloyd and thanked him for saving his life earlier, apologizing for attacking him without warning. He handed Lloyd food, freshly prepared. Lloyd recognized it as Legion fish sashimi. Tiruru then thanked Lloyd for taking care of Iris, and stated that this kindness would be repaid someday. Lloyd reacted with visible embarrassment and downplayed his role. Nero checked Iris for injuries. Instead of answering, Iris ran to Lloyd and hugged him. Lloyd stiffened in surprise, his face flushing, while Nero stood motionless. Iris thanked Lloyd openly. The sudden impact sent Lloyd flying backward into the water. The others shouted his name in alarm. As he surfaced, Lloyd felt certain that agreeing to teach Iris magic had been the right choice. Later that night, Iris reflected on the situation. Legion fish were high-class monsters that did not normally appear near Minerva. She questioned whether this could truly be coincidence. Lloyd pointed out that since arriving in Minerva, he had already defeated both a sandworm and a griffin, monsters of similar rank. Iris concluded that the situation was abnormal. The holy power of the temples had weakened, making it easier for powerful monsters to appear. Lloyd recalled that the griffin had emerged from the Temple of Winds. Nero agreed that this was suspicious. Temples were meant to be places of the strongest holy power, where high-class monsters should never appear. Lloyd felt unease settle in, as the implication became clear. Something was happening at the Temple of Winds. Once again, the stage was set there. The realization settled quickly. Iris explained that each shrine possessed a function that allowed a magical barrier to be erected, one capable of repelling powerful monsters through the holy energy of a saintess. Maintaining that balance was the responsibility of each saint within their country. The appearance of a high-tier monster inside the shrine meant something had already gone wrong at the Temple of Winds. Lloyd identified the temple's location beyond the forest. Iris reacted at once, and they moved without delay. Upon arrival, the damage was clear. A breach had opened in the barrier surrounding the shrine. Tiruru noted that others must have sensed the disturbance as well. Lloyd called out, searching for survivors. Voices answered him. Lara called out in surprise, while Isolde turned sharply upon recognizing Iris. Lloyd immediately noticed Isolde's injuries. She explained that they had been attacked by a group of 3 griffins. They had managed to hold them off for now, but another wave was certain to follow. Iris assessed the scene with concern. The signs pointed to a fierce battle. She asked whether the saint they had encountered before was present. Isolde explained that she was not. An investigation had already been requested due to the griffin outbreak, but the saint was stationed at the most distant shrine. Her return could take up to 2 weeks. Iris understood what that meant. With no alternative, she resolved to descend into the depths of the shrine herself and perform a cleansing ritual. Lloyd reacted with confusion at the term. Tiruru clarified that the ritual was necessary to restore and reinforce the barrier. She then turned to Lloyd with a request. Escorting Iris to the deepest part of the shrine would be dangerous, and she acknowledged that she herself might be a burden. Still, she trusted that Iris would be safe if Lloyd was at her side. With him there, she believed there was nothing to fear. Lloyd accepted without hesitation. Nero listened in silence, his expression tightening as the plan settled in. Nearby, Syphilia shifted her attention to food instead, wondering aloud about edible monsters. Lloyd calmly noted that beetles could be eaten, their many legs deceptive compared to how juicy the meat actually was. Syphilia reacted with open excitement, her interest instantly captured. As they moved on, Lloyd noticed stairs descending beneath the shrine. Iris explained that the upward path led to the dungeon entrance, while the downward route descended toward the deepest section of the temple. Nero warned that monsters had likely infiltrated the area and urged caution. Lloyd added a reminder to watch their rear, aware of how easily an ambush could form in such narrow passages. Nero quietly addressed Iris, sensing something unsettling about the food Lloyd had prepared earlier. He could not bring himself to trust it. Syphilia casually remarked that Nero's own cooking for Iris was not much different, finding the concern unnecessary. Nero bristled at the comment, clearly embarrassed. Iris reassured him calmly, expressing her trust that Lloyd would help maintain peace across the continent. Even so, Nero remained uneasy. The tension broke abruptly when Lloyd reacted first, warning Nero just as he unleashed lightning magic. The spell struck a spider lurking behind them, sending the monster crashing down near Nero. Iris and Lloyd rushed to him at once, checking for injuries. Nero confirmed he was unharmed. Syphilia paused, her attention drawn to something ahead. She studied it carefully, questioning whether it could even be counted as a beetle, then assessed its size. Judging by its appearance alone, it looked hard and difficult to eat. Lloyd snapped her attention back to the danger as another threat approached. A massive presence emerged from the shadows ahead. Lloyd identified it immediately as a king beetle. Syphilia's excitement only grew at the confirmation that it was still, in fact, a beetle. Without hesitation, she drew her blade and charged forward, unleashing a holy slash that cut cleanly into the monster. Syphilia's strike landed cleanly, drawing a brief reaction from Lloyd as he registered the precision of her movements. Iris clarified her background, noting that Syphilia had once been a holy knight, the same path Isolde had walked. With the threat momentarily controlled, Sephilia fixated on the fallen king beetle and asked for one of its legs. Lloyd pointed out its size, reminding her it was a king-tier monster. Her expression went flat. The next moment, she collapsed to the ground. Alarm rippled through the group as they rushed toward her. Sephilia admitted her will to fight was gone. Lloyd quickly realized she was simply starving. Nero observed the scene without comment. Lloyd suggested that cutting the meat into smaller portions might make it easier to eat. Nero abruptly stepped forward, taking the plate himself. He explained that removing the slime and overpowering the odor with strong spices would solve the problem. He prepared the food and handed it to Sephilia. Her reaction was immediate. Energy returned to her eyes as she devoured it, clearly satisfied. The change was instant. Sword in hand, she sprang back into motion and charged ahead once more. Lloyd watched in open amazement, struck by the realization that even beetles could become something extraordinary when cooked properly. The moment was cut short by urgent news. Lara's voice reached Lloyd from another battlefield, reporting that a large horde of high-tier monsters was advancing toward the shrine. The defenders were already engaged and could not hold out much longer. The barrier needed to be raised immediately. Lloyd recognized the danger at once. Iris responded without hesitation, urging everyone to move faster. As they resumed their advance, Nero called out to Lloyd, admitting that he had thoroughly enjoyed the earlier meal. Even so, he made it clear that his acknowledgement would wait until he uncovered the secret behind that flavor. Lloyd misunderstood the intent entirely, assuming it was a matter of secret ingredients. Nero dismissed the idea outright. Lloyd, undeterred, shifted the topic instead, eagerly asking about proper ways to cook beetle meat. Iris watched the exchange quietly, a small smile forming as they pressed onward. Sephilia reacted first, identifying the threat and charging straight toward it. The Minotaur lunged forward, but Iris raised her magic in time, forming a barrier that stopped the blow. Sephilia did not slow down. She closed the distance again and carved into the creature with a clean sword strike. Lloyd followed immediately, releasing a powerful spell that struck the monster head-on. The battle ended quickly. Afterward, Nero handled the remains without hesitation, preparing the Minotaur's meat on the spot. With the danger cleared, the group moved forward through the shrine, eating as they walked, their pace steady despite the earlier clash. Ahead, Iris pointed out a gate leading to the cleansing ritual chamber. Lloyd began to understand why Iris had been so determined to improve her magic. She had wanted to stand and fight alongside them, not behind them. Nero reacted with visible embarrassment, brushing the thought aside as overly simple. Lloyd noticed the response but did not press further. They entered the chamber together. Lloyd took in the surroundings, recognizing it as the place where barriers were raised. Iris stepped forward and prepared to begin the ritual, asking the others to guard her. Lloyd suddenly halted, sensing a disturbance in the air. In the same instant, Sephilia lunged forward, placing herself directly in front of Iris and intercepting a flurry of attacks aimed at her. When the assault ceased, daggers clattered to the ground around them. A sharp laugh echoed through the chamber. A masked girl emerged, revealing herself as the one who had been waiting for Iris. She identified Iris as a fake saintess and made it clear she had been paid a generous bounty to capture her. Lloyd realized in an instant that Iris was being hunted. Nero immediately recognized her as an assassin dispatched from Roland. He and Sephilia moved to strike, but their attacks were easily evaded as the assassin continued to mock their efforts. Lloyd responded by casting magic, striking the spot where the assassin landed. The figure collapsed. For a brief moment, they wondered if it was over. That moment shattered as another rain of daggers descended. Nero threw himself in front of Iris, using his own body to shield her from the attack. As the blades struck, the assassin reappeared unharmed. She revealed that the one they had defeated was merely the weakest of her clones, nothing more than a disposable shadow. Lloyd took in the scene, realizing this was not a single enemy, but a far greater threat unfolding before them. While Lloyd and the others confronted the assassin deep beneath the temple, chaos unfolded above ground. On the surface, Lyra stood trembling as the ground shook beneath her feet. Mars, already engaged with a monster looming nearby, tried to keep her focused, urging her to fight. Panic overtook her as she stared at the temple breaking apart. If the creature crossed the barrier, Minerva itself would fall. Around them, adventurers stared in terror at the massive silhouette advancing forward. The name spread through the ranks in fear. A land eater, a high-level monster. Some began to lose their resolve, voices shaking as they spoke of retreat. Isolde cut through the panic. She reminded them that abandoning the fight meant abandoning the city and its people. Iris and the others were already working to restore the barrier. Their task was simple and brutal: hold the line until then. From a distance, Tiruru watched the crumbling shrine, unease tightening her chest as her thoughts turned to Iris. Deep below, the assassin revealed herself without hesitation. She identified her allegiance to Roland and rebuked her own clone for openly exposing their identities. The clone dismissed the concern, treating introductions as simple courtesy. Nero struggled to understand the exchange, confused by the sight of an assassin arguing with her duplicates. Lloyd turned toward Iris, checking on the barrier's condition. Iris reported that a powerful force was pressing against it, and all she could do was stop the breach from widening. Her expression shifted as realization struck. She questioned whether the staff of Holy Destruction was involved. The clone answered plainly, producing the relic. The assassin reacted with irritation at the display, accusing the clone of showing off again. Iris demanded to know what they had done. Lloyd, unfamiliar with the artifact, listened as Iris explained its history. It was a weapon from the ancient war against demons, meant to be sealed away by the Holy Kingdom of Roland. Lloyd quickly grasped the implication. As long as the staff remained intact, the barrier could not be fully restored. The assassin revealed their plan without restraint. They had confirmed the saint of this country was absent. The outbreak and destruction were deliberate, a trap designed to draw Iris here. Anger hardened Iris's expression as she realized how many lives were being gambled for this ambush. Lloyd called out to her, sensing the shift. In an instant, the assassin and her clone appeared behind Iris. The threat was immediate. Sephilia moved without hesitation, stepping in behind of Iris and blocking the attack. The assassin calmly noted that every clone present was a first-class killer, questioning how long Sephilia could endure. Nero cursed under his breath, aware they were running out of time. Lloyd raised a force shield, knowing it meant abandoning offense to maintain protection. He entrusted the battle to the others. Sephilia seized Nero by the foot and launched herself forward, unleashing a combined holy slash that carried Nero along with it. The impact sent the enemy flying. Even the clones recoiled, shocked by the pressure behind the strike. They muttered in disbelief, struggling to comprehend her strength. The clones began arguing over who would advance next as they regrouped. The assassin cut through the hesitation and gave a final command. A thick smoke suddenly flooded the chamber, swallowing the battlefield. Lloyd immediately recognized the tactic and warned the others. Sephilia raised her guard as visibility vanished, the fight plunging into uncertainty once more. The assassin and her clones activated an illusion technique that bound the present to memories of the past. Sephilia froze in place as her surroundings shifted. She appeared alone, eating quietly. A familiar presence approached, offering her pastries. As she tasted them, her reaction changed, the flavor lingering in her senses. Lloyd called out to her, but she did not respond. One of the clones explained that Sephilia was reliving fragments of her past through hallucination. Another clone added that Sephilia had lived only through combat, never knowing the taste of good food. The assassin declared that this was the beginning of the end. She described the illusion as a space where one's deepest desires surfaced, a place too comfortable to escape. Once trapped, there was no waking from the endless dream. She took pride in the technique, confident in its perfection. Iris recognized the danger of the spell and turned to Lloyd in alarm. Lloyd hesitated, weighed down by uncertainty over what he truly desired. As the protective magic began to weaken, Iris called out to him again. The assassin noticed and turned her attention toward Nero. He too was drawn into an illusion. In it, Iris welcomed him as the head cook, imagining a future where everyone could enjoy good food together. Her joy was unrestrained as she praised his cooking, abandoning her former responsibilities. Lloyd watched Nero closely, sensing something was wrong. Lloyd realized he could no longer rely on protection magic alone. The enemy was clearly aiming for Iris, and with Nero and Sephilia still trapped in the illusion, he was the only one left to act. To protect her, he would have to release the barrier and fight directly. Nearby, Nero remained under the spell, focused only on Iris, praising her as she ate, completely unaware of the danger around them. Nero's illusion twisted further. He fed Iris excessively, urging her to eat more, his fixation growing distorted. Iris recoiled in confusion as the scene escalated. Even the assassin was taken aback by the warped desire unfolding before her. Abruptly, the illusion shattered around Nero. The assassin realized she could not maintain control over him. She had never encountered someone whose obsession overpowered the illusion itself. She dismissed him as an anomaly and resolved to defeat him directly. Lloyd seized the moment. A realization struck him, and he called for Nero to cook. Nero hesitated, confused by the timing, but Lloyd was certain that the cooking of the real Nero would reach Sephilia through the illusion. When Nero questioned the lack of ingredients, Lloyd provided a chest without hesitation. Despite his reluctance, Nero agreed to try. As the assassin stared in disbelief, Nero and Lloyd worked together in the middle of the battlefield, combining what remained. The result took shape as a dish made from leftover curry, finished with omeris, its presence cutting through the illusion that still clung to the field. The clones laughed, convinced that such clumsy resistance could never break their illusion. Their confidence vanished the moment Sephilia opened her eyes. She moved at once, cutting through them with her sword. The assassin reacted in shock. The staff of holy destruction was destroyed. Lloyd realized the plan had succeeded. The assassin clenched her teeth, unable to accept that her illusion had failed because of Sephilia's appetite. Sephilia continued eating, acknowledging her mistake in being deceived by illusionary food, while Nero noted that the same appetite had saved them. Iris then announced that the barrier was finally closing. On the surface, the massive creature prepared to launch another attack. Lyra lost her composure and clung to Mars, convinced it was the end, even attempting to kiss him. Mars struggled to push her away, barely able to fight under the pressure. At that moment, the barrier sealed completely, crushing the monster's neck and halting it mid-attack. Lyra and Mars fell silent as they watched the barrier hold. Only then did Lyra realize they had survived. Below, Lloyd shifted his focus back to the enemy and prepared to counterattack, noting that the assassin alone remained standing. The assassin responded with a quiet laugh. Lloyd suddenly sensed something wrong and recoiled as the defeated clones began merging back into her body. The assassin laughed as her power consolidated, abandoning the use of clones and choosing to fight with everything combined into a single form. She surged forward at extreme speed, launching a high-velocity sword attack. Lloyd met her head-on, striking her with a body reinforced by extreme physical enhancement. The blow sent the assassin flying into the wall. Lloyd judged her strength and responded with the same level of reinforcement he would use against the highest-class monsters. The assassin was left stunned, unable to comprehend the force that struck her. With the battle concluded, Isolde stepped in and declared that the assassin would be taken to the capital for trial. She expressed her gratitude to Iris and the others for protecting the Temple of Wind. Lloyd addressed the captured assassin, known as Black Crow, and questioned the reason behind the bounty placed on Iris. Black Crow revealed that the Holy Roland Prince sought Iris's elimination because she stood in the way of his plans. The truth stunned Isolde Seer, who confronted Iris about her banishment. Iris admitted it without resistance. Isolde grasped the implication immediately, realizing that the prince intended to provoke a war against their country. The weight of that realization spread through the group. Lloyd echoed the word in disbelief. Iris then turned to him and asked if he would accompany her to the capital to stop the impending invasion from the Roland kingdom. Lloyd hesitated, his thoughts drawn toward the capital and the person waiting for him there. The carriage moved steadily as they traveled toward Melzaria. Along the way, Isolde questioned the reason behind Iris's claim that the prince intended to start a war. Iris explained that Prince Geese had long insisted on seizing neighboring heathen counties to strengthen their forces against the demons. She had opposed him, arguing that such actions were no different from the demon invasion 2 centuries ago. For that stance, she was branded a fake and banished. She made it clear that the recent incidents were only the beginning. To stop Roland's invasion, she intended to ask Melzaria to help form an alliance with other nations. Isolde accepted this reasoning and stated that she would arrange an audience with the queen. During the ride, Iris turned her attention to Lloyd, checking on him with concern. Lloyd answered shakily that he was fine, though Iris continued to watch him closely. They soon arrived at the capital of the Melzaria kingdom. Iris took in the extravagant buildings and the crowds moving through the streets. Isolde explained that the queen favored elegance above all else, and her vassals reflected that preference in their refined appearance. Inside the palace, the queen greeted Isolde and praised her efforts in defending the Temple of Winds from the Black Crow. Isolde humbly lowered herself before the throne. The queen acknowledged Iris's sudden arrival and noted that, thanks to her actions, disaster had been avoided. Iris then presented the situation, revealing Roland's intentions and the danger they posed. At the mention of war, the nobles began murmuring among themselves. Questions arose about Iris's exile, the identity of the current saint, and the presence of Lloyd. Some recognized him only as an assistant mage known for a low material collection rate, dismissing him outright. The queen herself remarked on his unremarkable presence. Lloyd was caught off guard by her unfamiliarity despite his previous audiences. Iris stepped in and identified him as the mage who had defeated the Black Crow. The nobles reacted with disbelief, openly doubting such a claim and continuing to belittle him. Iris bristled at their remarks, and Isolde openly showed her anger at their ignorance. The queen silenced the room, declaring such behavior inelegant. The hall fell quiet. She explained that true elegance lay in composure, even when confronted with the unexpected, and that such composure was essential to capturing a crow. With a measured smile, she proposed a test to see whether Lloyd truly possessed the strength to defeat an enemy like the Black Crow. The arena fell into a tense hush as an announcer declared the arrival of Melzaria's most renowned knight commander, the Dandelion Knight of 100 Flowers. The queen's voice cut through the air, permitting him to face multiple opponents at once, daring him to defeat them and display his elegance. Iris wondered what kind of outfit the queen had made her wear, only to be met with the firm assurance that it was considered elegant. Nearby, Isolde noticed Lloyd again sinking into a gloomy mood. Sephilia and Isolde moved immediately to intercept the knight's strike, their swords clashing with his in swift, precise motions. Isolde urged Lloyd to stay focused, reminding him not to be distracted by the spectacle. He met her gaze, questioning her own attire, and Isolde retorted sharply, noting his own awkwardness. Isolde then turned to Sephilia, recalling her past as a holy knight, and instructed her to exploit the Gemini blade. Sephilia hesitated, momentarily confused by the term, but Isolde pressed the point, emphasizing that this was a rare chance to act. The knight responded with a powerful technique, Dandy Giga Bloom Flash, overwhelming Isolde and striking her down. The arena announcer declared the match over, and Lloyd's panic surged as he awaited the next challenger. Iris seized his wrist, pulling him forward, her determination clear. She urged him to act to prove his worth to those who had doubted him, reminding him that he was the hero who had saved Minerva. Slowly, Lloyd's composure returned. He nodded, ready to face the challenge. Together, Iris and Lloyd charged toward the knight. Meanwhile, in a distant room, Ruby observed the commotion outside, noting the noise with mild irritation. She closed the curtains, dismissing it casually, before focusing on her own preparations. A sly smile spread across her face as she greeted the top mage of the Magic Association, Crowley, with a polite but confident introduction. He responded with understated humility, noting how convenient travel had become. Ruby's mind raced. Crowley had been one of the legendary heroes who had defeated the Demon King 2 centuries ago, and despite retiring to a quiet countryside life, he still commanded respect as a master mage. Seeing the opportunity before her, Ruby intended to complete as many requests as possible and gain favor, carefully planning her next moves. She offered him homemade cookies as a gesture of hospitality, hoping to curry favor and demonstrate her skill. But as she stumbled, the cup flew toward him, only to be stopped abruptly by an unseen barrier, leaving her momentarily frozen. Ruby's offering was met with immediate scrutiny. The man criticized the flavor, noting the explosive ingredients and how they overpowered the taste. Ruby, shocked, realized he had identified the ingredients and the instant protection magic with just a single taste. She tried to explain that she intended a spicy flavor, but he had already shifted focus, preparing to gather materials immediately. Ruby's surprise was fleeting. She quickly handed him a list, relieved that this would help clear some overdue requests. As he read, his expression turned serious. He recognized a rare and dangerous ingredient, Fleur d'Insel, a phantom flower from the unexplored area. Ruby asked if he could acquire it by tomorrow, and he hesitated, explaining that even ordinary materials from dangerous zones could take a week, let alone something from an unexplored area. Ruby revealed that a teleportation circle left by his predecessor would bring him close to the destination, and he admitted he had never seen a real teleportation circle before. A tense silence followed. He warned Ruby that her enthusiasm for alchemy was commendable, but she seemed to underestimate other dangers. He described the unexplored area as so perilous that 1,000 knights could die in a single night. Ruby's confidence wavered, recalling how Lloyd had always returned safely. But the man pressed on. He acknowledged that if her words were true, her former assistant was no ordinary mage. He could only be described as a Chronicle-class mage. Ruby froze at the thought, her mind racing with the revelation. The man then regarded her, noting that she too possessed remarkable abilities, leaving Ruby to process the weight of his words. He added that one day she could surely become an alchemist comparable to Lloyd. She recalled a distant memory from the orphanage, watching Lloyd cry as he called for his parents. The image lingered in her mind, sharp and vivid. She smirked, dismissing the man's complaints, insisting that even Lloyd had managed the impossible alone. She mocked him for hiding behind excuses, questioning how he could call himself the best while failing to accomplish what she claimed was simple. Her scorn extended to the legendary heroes and the Demon King, reducing them to mere talk. The man's aura flared violently, a fierce heat radiating from his body. Ruby froze, astonished by the intensity. He declared that he could not allow insults to his comrades to go unanswered, demanding she retract her words. Ruby refused, calling him incompetent. In an instant, his power erupted, and the explosion sent Ruby screaming. When the smoke cleared, his body lay motionless on the ground. Panic surged through her as knights rushed in, demanding to know the source of the explosion. Ruby struggled to regain composure amid the chaos. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom of Roland, alarms rang out. The priest, frantic, realized the Black Crow had been defeated, and that the assassin he had entrusted with the staff of holy destruction was nothing more than a rogue operative from the east. Behind him, the king observed, cold and unyielding, insisting that all attempts to delay the inevitable could not halt the unification of the Western continent, the foundation he claimed for true peace. The Majesty relaxed in her bathtub, openly admiring the elegance of the moment. She praised Lloyd, remarking that he was more impressive than she had expected, and suggested that he wear such attire more often so others would not look down on him. Lloyd accepted her words without protest. As she continued speaking, she admitted that, after witnessing his abilities firsthand, she could now believe Iris's account. She decided to convene a meeting to begin forming a concrete plan. Soon after, Iris contacted her and explained that the incident at the Temple of Wind was merely a provocation by the Holy Roland Kingdom. She asked that the army not be mobilized. Alchemia understood that Iris wished to avoid involving the citizens, and she found that restraint fitting. Instead, she proposed cooperation with allied nations to impose trade restrictions on Roland, acknowledging that this would still place some burden on the people. Iris expressed her gratitude. The queen concluded that nothing would truly be resolved unless Prince Geese was stopped, a reality they understood better than anyone. Lloyd glanced toward Iris, quietly taking in her reaction. Later, Iris thanked everyone for the help they had given her up to that point. Isolde offered the use of a residence for the time being, explaining that it belonged to her family and was normally used as a vacation home. Lloyd noticed Iris's expression and sensed that thoughts of the prince had weighed on her for some time. Cephelia suggested that, now their immediate objective was complete, they take some time to rest until nightfall. Iris apologized for failing to notice their fatigue. Cephelia then entrusted Iris to Lloyd for the day, catching him off guard. Nearby, raised voices echoed as two figures argued, one demanding an explanation from Tururu, who responded curtly and urged them along. Isolde decided to stop by the Adventurers Guild since they had come this far, and suggested that Lloyd and Iris go sightseeing together. As they walked through the capital, Lloyd realized he knew little about its famous landmarks. He decided they could simply wander while talking. He asked Iris whether the prince was a frightening person, only to immediately regret choosing such a subject. Iris reassured him that it was fine. She explained that the prince was not so much frightening as desperate, driven by a desire to bring peace to the world. In that sense, they had once shared the same goal, though their ways of thinking differed. Lloyd reflected on that difference as her words settled. Her explanation drifted into a memory of a heated exchange. The prince had questioned why she could not understand his reasoning, insisting that seizing the heathen countries was necessary to prepare for a future demon invasion. Iris had firmly opposed him, arguing that invading other nations would make them no different from the demons themselves. Even if the world were unified under one will, it would still lead to countless meaningless deaths. The prince had responded with anger, claiming that if they could truly rely on the saints' barriers to stop an invasion, there would be no need to go so far. She was told that her holy power is not enough. After hearing that, Lloyd apologized for bringing it up, but Iris brushed it aside with a light laugh. To him, it was clear she had endured far more than she ever spoke about. They moved on and arrived at a lively attraction. Lloyd asked what the place was, and Iris explained that it was a magical traveling fair. She recalled visiting one like it in her hometown when she was a child. Her attention settled on a towering ride, and she expressed a simple wish to try it. The two boarded and were pulled along by the roaring motion. As the ride surged forward, Lloyd remarked that it reminded him of clinging to a dragon for an entire day during a battle. Iris did not answer at first. When he checked on her, she explained that she was not unwell. The sensation simply felt lacking after everything she had experienced recently. Constant exposure to intense situations had dulled her response to lighter thrills. Lloyd agreed, admitting he felt the same, though he still found the mechanism fascinating. As he looked closer, he noticed someone operating the controls manually. The operator turned out to be Dandelion. Lloyd called out in disbelief at what he was doing. Dandelion treated it casually, explaining that it served as training while also letting him watch children smile. The explanation left a quiet impression of his character. A child behind them muttered an insult toward Lloyd, calling him incompetent. Dandelion immediately corrected the child, lifting him up and firmly stating that Lloyd was stronger than himself. Lloyd thanked him. The children gathered, eagerly asking how Lloyd had won before, their curiosity replacing ridicule. With his task finished for the day, Dandelion took his leave and wished them well. Iris reacted shyly, and Lloyd suggested they head back. She agreed without hesitation. Later, within the castle, Lloyd turned to Iris and asked about her future once the war was stopped. He wondered whether she intended to return as Roland's saint or live peacefully elsewhere. Iris chose to answer by recounting her past. From birth, her talent for holy magic had been recognized by the bishop, leading to her placement in an institution for saint candidates. Lloyd was surprised, believing there could only be one saint per country. Iris explained that many possessed aptitude, but wielding holy power meant bearing responsibility for the nation's barriers. The role demanded mastery of history, prayer, and politics. Only those who could fulfill all of it were permitted to undergo the ceremony. She asked if that did not make her an elite. Lloyd acknowledged the effort she had put in. She explained that she endured it all for the sake of the people she wanted to protect. Her mother working at the market, her brothers laboring in the fields, her knight father who visited when he could, the people of Roland, raised in harsh lands yet kind at heart. In the end, her conflict with the prince worsened until she was banished. Even so, the comrades who followed her stood by her, believing she was right. Returning to the role of saint would be difficult, but Iris admitted she wished to live alongside the people who mattered to her. She could not endure a life of solitude. Lloyd reflected on how much effort it had taken for her to deal with Ruby alone, and his thoughts naturally returned to Iris herself. Noticing his silence, Iris watched him carefully. Lloyd answered by saying she was remarkable, and that he would do whatever he could to see her happy. Tears welled in Iris's eyes as she thanked him. They peered through a doorway as a voice welcomed Iris back, praising her for enduring the long journey to the capital. Her attention was immediately drawn to the lavish spread before them. A Melzeria-style full-course meal had been prepared, overseen personally by the butler. Tiruru cheerfully claimed that everyone had helped, only to be sharply scolded as she lunged toward the table. She muttered about being starving while continuing to eat, earning another reprimand for speaking with her mouth full. Iris turned to Lloyd and spoke of celebrating together once everything was over. Lloyd agreed, seeing it as a fresh start for her. Iris affirmed the promise. Later that night, whispers spread among the soldiers. Ruby the Alchemia had been arrested after allegedly attacking Crowley in her desperation for money. In her cell, Ruby seethed, railing against the rumors being spread about her and wondering why no one would defend her, despite her status. Something was suddenly tossed into her cell, startling her. Nearby prisoners muttered apologies and unsettling remarks. Some spoke of failure and hunger. Others recognized her as Melzeria's top alchemist and questioned whether she would be taken to Roland. One dismissed the idea, calling her too valuable, suggesting instead that handing her over would boost reputations. Another silenced the chatter, noting that failure would mean execution regardless. Ruby listened in disbelief as the discussion spiraled. Someone suggested escape. She scoffed at the idea, pointing out the impossibility. Keys were suddenly produced, proving otherwise. Concerns were raised about the long distance to the border, only to be brushed aside. Ruby mentioned her atelier and the teleportation circle hidden there. Assuming magic could be used, the answer came easily. She decided to go along, planning to present herself as having been forcibly dragged into the incident, believing that would clear the accusations surrounding Crowley. The group vanished into the night. The following morning, Lloyd and the others were summoned to the castle's reception hall. The early hour left them puzzled. The butler greeted them politely, noting that breakfast was not yet prepared. Once assembled at the table, Iris drew Lloyd's attention forward. The Majesty delivered the report. An important figure in the royal capital had nearly been assassinated. The suspect had escaped alongside Black Crow. Border troops had also come under attack. With a steady, unblinking gaze, the Majesty announced that Roland had begun its invasion of Melzeria. Iris admitted that she had not grasped the prince's true resolve until Black Crow appeared, and by that point, Iris had already departed Roland. Iris accepted responsibility, believing that everything she had done so far had only worsened the situation. She resolved to return to Roland and appeal to the prince once more, determined to stop him no matter the cost. Nero opposed the idea, explaining that Iris could no longer return openly, as the army was already positioned at the border. Moving together would be difficult, but if she went alone, there might still be a possibility. Iris expressed her gratitude to everyone. At that moment, Lloyd recalled something important. There might be a safer route into Roland by using the teleportation circle in Ruby's atelier. However, that path would require confronting Ruby. He hesitated, then forced himself to speak. He announced that he had an idea. When pressed to explain, his words faltered. He managed to say Ruby's name before collapsing, with the cause declared to be anxiety. Tiruru remarked that Lloyd must have been too frightened to finish what he was saying and had passed out from fear, suggesting that whatever he intended to propose must have been serious. Even so, Lloyd faintly murmured that he had an idea. Nero tried to understand what Lloyd had been attempting to convey. Iris blamed her own impatience, believing it had driven Lloyd to push himself too far, and quietly wished she could read his mind. The Majesty then summoned the attendants and presented an item they had seized from the demons. She introduced it as an elegant tool called Enter One's Mind, noting that it had once carried a less refined name she had chosen to change. The tool allowed someone to enter another person's mind by sleeping beside them while it was worn. When asked whether it resembled the hypnosis spell used by Black Crow, she acknowledged the similarity but warned that the outcome was uncertain. The choice to use it was left to them. Iris volunteered without hesitation. Nero agreed to join as well. Isolde refused, stating that she and the others would remain behind so they could intervene if those who entered did not awaken. Iris then sought consent from Lloyd, who remained unconscious. Lloyd soon found himself awakening in a familiar place. He recognized it as the atelier and recalled that he had been trying to tell everyone about the teleportation circle. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. It was Ruby, criticizing his slowness and mocking his lineage. Lloyd responded sharply, only to be overtaken by feelings of worthlessness and regret for involving Iris in his troubles. Another voice reached him soon after. It was Iris. Ruby reacted harshly, questioning who she was, then realized she was Lloyd's companion. Iris remained firm. She rejected Ruby's treatment of him and affirmed what Lloyd truly was. Lloyd was an exceptional mage. Ruby immediately dismissed Iris, declaring that Lloyd's gathering efficiency was only 40% and branding him a failure fit only to be treated as her servant. The hostility in her words crossed a clear line. Iris responded by summoning a water dragon and ordering Ruby to release Lloyd. The attack struck its mark and Ruby reeled from the impact. Iris acknowledged responsibility without hesitation. Ruby took note of her resolve, recognizing her courage as one of Lloyd's companions. Iris understood that this place was a world shaped by imagination and that brute force alone would not decide the outcome. She searched for another way forward. Lloyd faltered, overwhelmed by his own sense of inadequacy. He cried out the names of those who had supported him, admitting that despite all their advice, his fear of Ruby still remained. He urged them to leave him behind. Iris refused outright. She reminded him that he did not have to face an insurmountable wall alone, and that relying on others was not a weakness. He had always supported her, and now it was her turn. She reached out to him and asked him to take her hand. As their connection took hold, Iris's presence expanded within the castle. Her form grew immense, dwarfing everything around her. Ruby reacted in shock. Iris calmly lifted Ruby and sealed her inside a container, restoring order to the space. With a quiet smile, she signaled that everything was settled. Lloyd acknowledged his earlier promise to do anything for Iris. Iris replied that she was simply glad she could help him when he needed it. Lloyd awakened to find Iris sleeping beside him. Once fully conscious, he revealed what he had been trying to say all along. There was a teleportation circle inside Ruby's atelier. With that, the group moved together toward their next destination. At the atelier, Iris checked on Lloyd's condition. He admitted that Ruby's voice no longer echoed as strongly, and that he felt capable of asking her to activate the magic circle now. Lloyd knocked on her door, arriving with a request he intended to ask of her. Before he could act, a knight appeared and blocked their path, declaring the area restricted to the public. When Isolde asked what had happened, the knight revealed the reason for the lockdown. The owner of the atelier had been accused of attempted murder. An investigation was already underway. The situation stunned everyone. Iris quietly wondered what Ruby could have done to cause this. Lloyd decided they would set the matter aside for now. The magic circle here was still usable, and activating it would take them directly to his gathering site in Roland. Isolde raised the concern of how they would deal with the prince once they arrived, warning against reckless action. Lloyd stated that he had a plan, but would explain it only after they teleported. Nero reminded everyone that supplies mattered and brought along the van ball of snacks. Lloyd checked whether Isolde would be joining them. She confirmed that she had already issued instructions to her subordinates during her absence and could not ignore the looming crisis tied to Minerva. Lloyd then asked about Sephilia. She and the others chose to stay behind, explaining that they did not want to slow the group down, and offered their apologies. Iris searched for Tururu. Tururu admitted that in the past she would have stopped Iris because of the danger, but now she only reminded her to be careful. The group gathered and prepared themselves. Lloyd instructed everyone to line up, explaining that he would send them through one by one to prevent their bodies from overlapping during teleportation. The difficulty of teleportation magic weighed on him as he focused on the task ahead and turned his attention toward Prince Geese. Elsewhere, Ruby grew impatient, questioning why no one had arrived yet. She believed the Prince of Roland should have come to retrieve them. The Black Crow assured her they were close, though Ruby complained about the cold. From a distance, She noticed soldiers approaching. The knights quickly identified their targets. Ruby and the Black Crow were seized and bound in restraints. Ruby reacted in confusion, only to be silenced immediately. She was informed that she was not permitted to speak and that her fate had already been decided. Ruby Alchemia had been sentenced to death. A full week passed after their capture before they finally reached the capital. The Black Crow reported directly to the prince, admitting the failed assassination but presenting a captive she claimed still held value. The prince accepted the report and chose to overlook the failure. The two embraced openly, drawing a sharp reaction from a nearby soldier who questioned the farcical display. Ruby realized too late that following the assassin may have been a mistake. Inside the audience chamber of Roland's castle, a soldier knelt and delivered his report. The offensive on the Melzeria front was advancing smoothly. A woman standing beside the throne responded with certainty, noting the prince's deep concern for the current situation and his desire to resolve it swiftly. Only then did Ruby recognize the man before her as the Prince of Roland. The prince spoke of unifying the continent, calling it the final wish of the king who had been slain by demons. Fulfilling that ambition would secure his succession to the throne. The woman beside him declared that he alone was worthy of ruling above all others and pledged that Ezekiel would support his undertaking. The Black Crow, overwhelmed by the atmosphere, grew visibly tense, prompting Ruby's irritation. The prince praised Ezekiel as a model saint, contrasting her obedience with Iris's constant resistance. He recalled Iris opposing war, objecting to tax increases on farmers, and even interfering in matters as trivial as the royal kitchen. Her authority as a saint, wielded against him, had long been a source of resentment. Ezekiel dismissed those grievances as matters of the past and affirmed her presence at his side now. Ruby observed everything in silence as another report was delivered. During patrols, the soldiers had captured the Black Crow. The assassin reiterated her failure against Iris, but insisted that the captive she brought would still be useful. The prince cut her off without hesitation. He denounced her incompetence, declared both her and Ruby worthless, and ordered that they be taken away for execution. Ruby protested as they were seized, realizing too late how grave her mistake had been. She reminded herself that she was Melzeria's foremost alchemist, yet her words carried no weight. Before they could be removed, Ezekiel intervened. She urged restraint and asked that their lives not be taken so carelessly, requesting that they instead be placed under her authority. Ruby froze in disbelief. The soldiers complied, remarking that she should be grateful for the saint's compassion. As they were escorted out, Ruby grasped that they had narrowly escaped immediate death. Outside the chamber, the prisoners exchanged uneasy glances and murmurs. The Black Crow casually questioned the others about their circumstances. An elderly man revealed himself as a bishop who had followed Iris. Another admitted he had angered the prince. A woman confessed to committing a brutal crime. Ruby listened, unsettled, and wondered what fate awaited them under the saint's custody. The old man explained that Ezekiel was once a saint from another country, a land destroyed by demons. After its fall, Roland accepted her, and she was elevated as their new saint. Ruby remained silent as the meeting settled in. Soon after, they were gathered together. Ezekiel appeared before them, accompanied by a strange beast. The Black Crow reacted to its presence, but Ezekiel treated it casually, identifying it as her pet and dismissing any concern. Soldiers moved through the group, distributing documents to each of them. Ezekiel announced her interest in alchemy and declared that she required assistance from slaves. As Ruby examined the papers, she immediately understood the implications. The listed materials were impossible to obtain. Many were located in unexplored areas. Another alchemist in the group reached the same conclusion and voiced it aloud, recognizing that this was effectively a death sentence. Before the thought could fully settle, the beast struck him down in an instant. Ezekiel calmly stepped over the body. Ruby forced herself to keep looking. Ezekiel clarified that there had been a misunderstanding. This was not an order but an expression of faith. Their lives were entrusted to her will alone. If she commanded them to leap into a cave, they were expected to do so willingly. Any return without completing the task would be met with immediate execution. Fear spread through the group as they were driven forward. As Ruby, the Black Crow, and the others moved forward, Ezekiel left them with a final warning. Any return before gathering everything would be met with immediate execution. As they traveled, they came upon a warning sign standing alone along the path. Ruby understood that beyond that point lay the unexplored area, a place where holy power could no longer reach. She turned toward the Black Crow, recalling the promise that everything would work out if she followed her. The assassin explained that the prince favored Ezekiel for being gentler than the previous saint, though no one had expected her to wield her authority this way. It was even possible she had been responsible for driving the former saint away. There was no path back. Defiance meant certain death. One of them urged cooperation as the only chance of survival. They moved on together. Without warning, one of them was swallowed whole as something burst from the ground. A three-headed chihuahuabarus emerged, throwing the group into panic as they scattered in fear. Ruby recognized the monster immediately as they ran. One of them spotted what looked like a nearby cave and urged the others toward it, hoping for shelter. As they drew close, a dark creature lashed out from within. Tentacles surged forward, seizing two of them in an instant. Ruby realized too late that it was not a cave at all, but a dark Alron lying in wait. Ruby and the Black Crow continued running. With no other options, the Black Crow deployed her clones. The duplicates were devoured one after another, but the assault did not stop. The strategy was not to distract, but to overwhelm, forcing the chihuahuabarus to gorge until it choked, a method as effective as it was grotesque. Even so, the monster showed no sign of slowing, consuming endlessly. The scene was grotesque and unrelenting. As she fled, Ruby's footing failed, and one leg sank into the ground. Behind her, the chihuahuabarus reared up, its jaws opening wide. In the next moment, she was inside its mouth, her body sliding along its tongue as it prepared to swallow her whole. Tears streamed down her face as the thought of death surfaced. Memories followed in fragments, scenes of how she had treated Lloyd with cruelty and dismissal. Another memory surfaced after that, of being told by a master mage that she might one day become an alchemist comparable to him. The recollection steadied her resolve. Refusing to give in, Ruby drove her blade upward into the monster's palate. Blood sprayed across her as the beast convulsed. With a final surge of force, she was expelled from its mouth and thrown to the ground. She lay there gasping as the Black Crow confirmed that she had survived. The fallen fang of the chihuahuabarus was among the materials they needed. Ruby let out a weak laugh. She wanted a bath, though she knew that would not be possible for some time. Elsewhere, Lloyd confirmed that everyone had arrived safely. Iris acknowledged that the teleportation had allowed them to cross the border without incident. Iris turned her attention to Lloyd and asked for his plan to stop the prince. Lloyd presented an item box as the solution. The idea stunned everyone. His plan was to place the prince inside and take him back to Melzaria. Doubt spread immediately, but Lloyd explained that it was safe, something he had used in place of a tent, surprisingly comfortable inside. Iris considered it carefully and recognized that it could work. Item boxes were master-grade magic, usable by only a select few. No one else would ever consider placing a person inside an item box, let alone abducting a prince that way. Lloyd laid out his plan to bring the prince to Melzaria for peace negotiations, presenting it as his own proposal. Sephilia noted that the prince himself would become negotiation material that only Lloyd could secure, prompting Isolde to question her phrasing. Isolde then stated that from that point onward, they would take the lead. Lloyd looked to them and asked if they were all natives of the land. Iris straightened with a resolute expression as, one by one, they raised their hands. Iris voiced her anticipation of working together with everyone as they moved forward. From far away, unseen eyes watched them. Through Ezekiel's magic, their movements were laid bare. She observed calmly, remarking that it seemed some insects had slipped inside. The creature turned out to be magical. Sephilia wondered whether its meat was edible, but Lloyd identified it as a puppet being controlled by a magician. Iris realized this meant she had finally returned to familiar ground. The prince was staying inside the cathedral. Inside the cathedral, an alert echoed through the halls, announcing intruders within the castle. Ezekiel's familiar had already been defeated. The report caught the prince off guard as he learned that Iris and the others had returned. Ezekiel reacted with anger, unable to accept that her familiar had been overcome. She immediately ordered the soldiers to hunt them down and leave no survivors. Iris was once again proving that she would not back down easily. Outside, Nero observed that entering through the front would be difficult. Lloyd proposed handling the guards with an explosion, but Iris stopped him before he could act. Lloyd insisted that they could not advance unless the soldiers were dealt with. The guards nearby began to sense something unusual. Iris tried to stop Lloyd, and Isolde questioned his judgment. Not everyone possessed the same resilience as fighters like Dandelion or Black Crow. For an ordinary person, being struck by Lloyd's magic would almost certainly be fatal. The realization startled Lloyd. Even with minor body strengthening, a poorly placed hit could easily kill someone. He considered using plant magic instead, but Iris pointed out that it would expose their position immediately. Isolde warned him not to use magic at all if he could not fully restrain its power. Iris noted that Lloyd's lack of common sense was unsurprising, given his experience gathering materials alone in unexplored regions. Isolde concluded that they were not there to start a war and needed to avoid drawing attention. At the same time, someone was acting from a distance. It was Sephilia. Isolde quickly moved toward her and demanded to know what she was doing. Sephilia explained that their food supplies had run out. Isolde was confused, since they had brought so much with them. Lloyd stepped in, asking about the location, and Sephilia revealed that it was the food storage area. Isolde realized this was where leftovers were kept and decided they should leave and find another route. Iris stopped her, but Isolde insisted they withdraw and reassess. Nearby, soldiers discussed the area, noting that security was lighter there and that assigning more guards would be wasteful. They had no idea an infiltration was already underway. Later, Iris and Lloyd moved through the interior of the cathedral disguised as soldiers. Isolde reminded them that being discovered would cause serious trouble and warned them not to act recklessly. Lloyd wondered if there was any magic that could help them slip past unnoticed. Isolde emphasized that Lloyd's item box was essential to the success of their plan. They were suddenly addressed by another soldier. The question immediately put them on edge. The soldier demanded to know their assigned post. Iris responded that they were part of a guerrilla unit responding to a disturbance in the library. As the moment passed, Lloyd recognized the precision of the situation and silently acknowledged Sephilia's skill, befitting someone who had once served as a holy knight. Iris guided them forward, indicating that they would assist and that the library lay ahead. The soldiers followed alongside and began asking about the intruders. Iris realized they needed a convincing excuse to separate. Lloyd's reputation as a magician with an extremely low material collection rate came up, and the topic shifted awkwardly when the number was questioned and quickly brushed aside. The soldiers continued, mentioning 2 former holy knights who had turned traitor. Sephilia was labeled a selfish berserker, and Isolde was mocked as a brute with no sense. Both were described as dangerously powerful and not to be taken lightly. They were blamed for driving the former saint into madness, their appearances dismissed as devilish. The remarks struck a nerve. Iris reacted instantly, forming an ice spear and striking without hesitation. Isolde was caught off guard by the sudden action, but Iris made it clear they were pushing forward. Shortly after, an alert spread through the area announcing that a soldier had been killed near the Grand Corridor. Within the cathedral, Ezekiel dismissed the fallen soldier as worthless. She believed it made little difference. The cathedral itself was filled with magic beasts, and the intruders would inevitably be driven into a corner. She ordered the monsters to move out and avenge their fallen kin. As the creatures advanced, Lloyd took responsibility for dealing with them and moved ahead. During the chaos, Isolde was suddenly recognized. The voice belonged to a man from the guild. She questioned why he was there, and he revealed that he and others had been imprisoned after accepting a job near the border. As Malzarians, their capture had been treated as expected. Merchants and civilians were also being detained, handled without restraint, and sent into deadly areas to be killed by monsters. Iris could not accept what she was hearing and questioned how such actions were being allowed under the prince's rule. Lloyd quickly gathered everyone together, guiding them into a confined space and urging them to move fast despite the tight quarters. The rescued people expressed gratitude as they were ushered inside. While securing the area, they noticed one door that stood out as unusually sturdy. Suspecting someone might be inside, they forced it open and found a child chained within. Isolde immediately recognized her condition as critical and in need of urgent treatment. Lloyd sensed an unusually large amount of magical energy within her, suggesting she was a magician from another country who had been captured. Iris understood then that children had been subjected to torture under this system, and she acknowledged that allowing things to reach this point was a grave failure. Lloyd acknowledged that he did not understand the prince's intentions, but allowing this to continue would only lead to more suffering. Before they could move further, soldiers spotted them and identified them as intruders. The group was quickly surrounded. Isolde reacted first, releasing her wind magic to break the formation. She judged that they were already close to the cathedral and chose to draw the soldiers away in the opposite direction, creating an opening. She left Iris and Lloyd with a warning to stay alert. Iris turned to Lloyd and made it clear that this was the moment to show the prince something beyond expectation. Lloyd responded without hesitation. Inside the cathedral, the unfolding situation was being observed. The prince questioned Ezekiel on whether the intruders had been stopped. Ezekiel admitted failure, noting that they were a highly capable group. Still, she expressed confidence. The Roland army's strongest unit, the Holy Flame Knights, had been deployed. The bridge leading to the cathedral was fully exposed to ranged attacks, sealed by an unbroken formation. No one, not even the smallest creature, should have been able to pass. That certainty collapsed in an instant. Massive vines erupted across the bridge, sweeping away everyone stationed there. The prince was stunned as the scene unfolded before him. Ezekiel drew his attention to another sight. The cathedral itself was being wrapped and restrained by the same overwhelming growth. As confusion spread, a figure emerged, declaring that no one would be coming to the prince's aid. Iris stepped forward and confronted him directly, reminding him that she had once asked him to walk the same path as they did. The prince recoiled at the sight of her. He accused her actions of being nothing more than self-righteous interference, claiming that she was destabilizing human power and handing an advantage to the demons. Iris rejected that accusation, recognizing it as a pretense. The prince was not afraid for the world, but for his plans losing shape. She made it clear that their purpose was to protect the people, the duty a saint was meant to uphold. If the prince intended to rule the kingdom, he would have to force them down first. The prince clenched his teeth, frustrated by her refusal to yield. A sudden attack was launched toward them, but Lloyd reacted in time, shielding them from harm. Ezekiel stepped forward, declaring that she would grant their wish and defeat them herself. The saint who now stood before them was no longer an ally, but an obstacle blocking their path. The prince questioned why Iris stood beside such a dangerous mage. Iris identified the man before them as the prince himself, which led Lloyd to immediately grasp the situation and focus on capturing him as the objective. Ezekiel stepped forward, declaring that their return would end here and addressing Iris as a false saint. Lloyd noticed that Ezekiel wore the same ceremonial attire as Iris. Ezekiel turned her attention to Lloyd, acknowledging his name and his actions so far, but made it clear that those who drew attention would be dealt with first. She unleashed her magic, Delta Stream, a top-tier form of wind magic. Iris recognized its strength at once. Lloyd reacted instantly, deploying a force shield to block the attack. At the same time, the Holy Flame Knights continued to be overwhelmed as massive vines tore through their formation. From a distance, Isolde pointed out the cathedral itself. The vines had begun to rip into its structure, causing parts of it to tilt under the strain. The sight left them stunned. The prince laughed in confidence, pointing to the destruction as proof of Ezekiel's power and declaring that even Lloyd stood no chance against her. Ezekiel acknowledged the display, expecting the attack to have ended the fight. Instead, she was met with an unexpected outcome. Iris and Lloyd remained unharmed. Iris immediately countered with her own magic, releasing a powerful cyclone. Both the prince and Ezekiel reacted in shock. Ezekiel observed the spell closely and identified it as physically enhanced magic. From his position, the prince could clearly see the battle unfolding. In that moment, he failed to notice Iris closing in behind him. Iris launched an ice spear. The prince responded by intercepting it with fireballs. He questioned whether Iris had truly come to kill him. Iris made it clear through her actions that killing him was not her goal, but taking him with her was unavoidable. The alchemic device Iris had left on him activated, leaving him no room to resist as it released water bullets. Iris shielded herself, then followed up by unleashing water dragon magic. The toll of the spell was immediate. Iris understood that the technique was extremely draining and unlikely to be used again. The prince demanded to know where she had learned such magic. Iris revealed that Lloyd had taught her. He pointed out how readily she followed Lloyd's guidance, contrasting it with how she had never listened to him. His thoughts drifted back to her coronation, when Iris Elizabeth Quarter had been named saint and asked to devote herself entirely to her divine duty. At that time, Iris had sworn to protect the weak, bring justice and peace, and cleanse the land of deception and evil. She was celebrated as the prodigy of the Saint Training School, elevated to sainthood, and deemed a fitting partner for Roland in ruling the theocratic nation. That same day, Teruru had been introduced as the one responsible for Iris's daily needs, allowing her time to settle in. Iris had been overwhelmed by the scale of the castle, her eyes lighting up at how vast and beautiful it was. Watching her then, the prince had smiled to himself, questioning whether this child truly was the saint of the nation. He had asked about the castle's cook, learning that Iris wanted everyone to enjoy delicious food like the meals her mother once made in her hometown. To him, she had seemed ignorant of the world, nothing more than a naive child. The prince reflected that Iris likely believed her mother was the finest person in the world. She had been praised constantly by those around her, and yet things had ended up like this. Back in the present, Lloyd connected the pieces and understood why Nero had chosen to side with them. Ezekiel advanced again, making it clear the confrontation was not over. The prince dismissed Iris's past as irrelevant, reducing it to proof of her ignorance. He recalled a past operation to purify a frontier temple and admitted he had failed to foresee the consequences. When holy power weakened, it allowed something far worse to emerge. The scene shifted to a memory of Iris speaking with a holy knight who had protected the area. Iris acknowledged that protection and expressed sincere gratitude. The knight responded that such work was simply part of a holy knight's duty, and listing all of those duties would never end. Iris stated that she needed to move on to the next location immediately. The knight began to mention the carriage and escort arranged under the saint's authority, but the moment passed before he could finish. Back in the present, the prince criticized Iris for lacking self-awareness despite her status as a saint. He spoke of a world under demonic invasion and of losing his father to them. His goal had been to expand territory, unify nations under stronger rule, and create a force capable of protecting everyone. Iris questioned whether that meant annexing other nations, recognizing that such actions would only deepen divisions. If humans turned on each other now, they would become no different from the demons themselves. The prince challenged her understanding of leadership and responsibility. As royalty, he saw her interference as unacceptable, dismissing her stance as arrogance born from naivety. As the pressure mounted, Iris faltered and fell, drawing Lloyd's attention in alarm. The prince stood over her, breathing heavily as the weight of the confrontation settled in. Iris struggled to respond. She acknowledged that his criticism might hold truth, but she could not abandon her own convictions. She was still just a girl from the countryside at heart. What she could not accept was how things had been handled. The prince had chosen banishment and attempted execution when there had been other paths he could have taken instead. Iris accepted that the prince was not entirely wrong. She bore responsibility for pushing him to this point. That was why she had returned, to stop him herself. With that resolve, she released her magic again, forming a water dragon that surged forward and engulfed the prince completely. As Ezekiel charged in response, Iris signaled Lloyd. He activated super physical enhancement and intercepted the attack, sending Ezekiel flying back. In the same motion, he hurled the item box forward. The box opened and the water dragon, with the prince sealed inside it, was pulled in and contained. The objective was achieved. Iris allowed herself a brief smile. The battlefield fell quiet, leaving only the two of them standing there. Lloyd moved closer to her. Iris checked on him hesitantly, and Lloyd confirmed he was unharmed, though the moment had caught him off guard. Iris paused, then apologized, embarrassed that he had seen her in such a vulnerable state. Lloyd reacted with visible fluster, then reached out and took her fingers. He admitted that he too had been acting foolishly, and seeing that Iris was not always flawless brought him a sense of relief. Lloyd held on to her, steadying them both. Elsewhere, Ruby reported that she had managed to gather the materials, but something about them felt wrong. The crow questioned her concern just as a massive shadow passed overhead. A gigantic monster loomed above them. Ruby urged immediate action, but before anything could be done, the creature moved on without attacking. As silence returned, the realization set in. Two enormous monsters were moving in the same direction, and their path was leading straight toward Roland. Ezekiel struggled to rise, realizing too late that she had underestimated Lloyd. In her current state, victory was no longer certain. A report came in that the item box had been damaged. Lloyd noted that it had already been packed beyond its limits, and the water dragon had been the final strain that caused it to break. Ezekiel understood that they needed to leave immediately. A violent release followed as the contents of the box burst open, sending the people trapped inside spilling out all at once. She had already summoned spare monsters as reinforcements. As she reassessed the situation, her attention fixed on someone Iris was holding. Ezekiel emerged from hiding and demanded that the child be handed over. The prince no longer mattered to her. The girl, however, was essential. She threatened their lives if they refused. Lloyd was confused by the demand, but Iris responded without hesitation. She refused to hand over a defenseless child to someone like Ezekiel. Ezekiel saw this as yet another obstruction. Iris would not only fail her mission, But this defiance would end her as well. Left with no alternatives, Ezekiel decided to reveal the power she had intended to keep hidden. A horn emerged from her head as her form changed completely. Iris immediately recognized what this meant. Ezekiel was a demon. The realization stunned everyone present, including the prince, who had always believed her to be the ideal saintess. Ezekiel launched her assault at once. Lloyd shouted for everyone to fall back as her claws tore through the air. Faced with the sudden attack, Lloyd reacted on instinct and released explosion magic. The blast thundered across the sky, forcing everyone to brace against the shockwave. Iris could not believe what she was witnessing. Ezekiel's magical output rivaled Lloyd's. Lloyd now fully understood just how powerful Ezekiel was. She pressed the attack again, but Lloyd managed to block her strike using his staff. The two clashed head-on, neither yielding ground. Another explosion rocked the ground beneath them. When the dust cleared, the castle was visibly tilting, its structure on the verge of collapse. The battle continued without pause. Iris could only watch, realizing that the fight unfolding before her existed on an entirely different level. Ezekiel acknowledged Lloyd's strength, noting that it was remarkable for a human. She questioned what kind of training could produce someone like him. Lloyd answered simply that he spent his time collecting materials. Ezekiel pressed further, and Lloyd clarified that these materials came from uncharted territories, places like the White Sand Dunes and other regions few dared to enter. Ezekiel was taken aback. She had trained in those same areas for a long time. Lloyd was equally surprised by her reaction. Ezekiel admitted her disbelief that someone else had survived those lands and returned. When Lloyd asked why she would train in such a dangerous place, she dismissed the explanation as too long to give. What she did reveal was far more significant. She was the very first subordinate of the Demon Lord. Ezekiel recalled the words of the Demon Lord, who claimed that overwhelming power was necessary to defeat courage. She had been declared too weak again and again. From that moment on, she was condemned to train in the White Sand Dunes for 1,000 years. Ezekiel had resisted, knowing that even seasoned warriors could not survive there for more than a few days. The Demon Lord had dismissed her objections, treating it not as an order but as fate. Day after day, Ezekiel endured that hellscape. She was burned by the sands, pushed to the brink of death repeatedly, and survived only through sheer persistence. Lloyd remarked that his own experiences there had been similar, being sent back time and again until it became unbearable. He acknowledged how severe 1,000 years in that place must have been. Ezekiel recognized that he truly understood her suffering. As time passed, she survived by consuming monster flesh, and her resentment toward the Demon Lord steadily deepened. When the training finally ended, the Demon Lord praised her endurance and granted her the honor of fighting on the front lines together. Ezekiel accepted that role, but the loyalty she once held had already withered. After the Demon Lord was weakened in battle against the hero, Ezekiel struck from behind, using a sedative to incapacitate her and taking her captive. Iris recalled what human history recorded, that the Demon Lord had suffered a grave wound and was lying in wait for her return. Ezekiel denied that account entirely. The truth she revealed was that what Iris was holding was the shadow of the Demon Lord herself. The realization stunned everyone present. Ezekiel explained that she had concealed herself among humans, patiently waiting for the right moment. She manipulated monsters, deceived the prince, and even assumed the role of Roland's saintess to advance her plans. Iris questioned why she would take on the duty of destroying humanity, a role meant for the Demon Lord. Ezekiel's answer was clear. She intended to surpass the Demon Lord and take revenge against her. True victory, as Ezekiel saw it, would not come from the overwhelming power the Demon Lord prized. It would come from layered schemes, control from the shadows, and the complete erasure of the Demon Lord's influence. In doing so, Ezekiel sought to deny her existence altogether. Lloyd acknowledged Ezekiel's resolve and called her remarkable. Even so, he could not accept the cost of her ambition. The manipulation of nations, the suffering inflicted on Roland and Minerva, the harm done to Iris and countless innocent civilians, and the use of Ruby to gather materials for her designs were all lines he could not cross. Ezekiel admitted she had hoped Lloyd would understand her reasons. Instead, this encounter marked the collapse of her plans. Lloyd's interference had brought everything to a halt. With no alternatives left, she resolved to settle the matter through force. Her ambitions would continue in the next country, but only after she buried everyone standing in her way.